This week, we welcome Phillip Wylie, an instructor at EIN, to discuss offensive cyber security education and getting started in pen testing. In the second segment, I will personally walk you through how to build a kick-ass PC for security research or general security work, or just a really kick-ass PC. Finally, in the security news, calling all people who know how to patch Microsoft Exchange servers. We need you, like now. Rockwell Automation PLC flaws and what you can't do about them. A book review I agree with, or two book reviews that I agree with. Be careful what you expose at home. Yet another Chrome 0 day. Jailbreak your iPhone. The cybersecurity consolidation. And taking back the term hacker. For real this time. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Keeping up with security issues across thousands of web assets without the right approach to web application security is a daunting task. Get ahead with web vulnerability scanning automation from NetSparker, a leader in dynamic and interactive application security testing known for its ease of use and accurate results. Detect a wide range of vulnerabilities in all legacy and modern web applications, address security bugs at scale by automating the confirmation process, automatically prioritize vulnerabilities, and assign actionable tickets to the right developers in their native workflows for rapid remediation. For more information on how to scale application security with ease, visit securityweekly.com/NetSparker.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to the Ultimate Infinity Security Edition of our host, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
It's good to be here, Larry. Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 685, recorded on March 4th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, the doctor is in the house, none other than Dr. Doug White.
It is I is here. I'm the Ultimate Infinity Edition of something.
The Ultimate Infinity Edition of Dr. Doug White.
But you're limited to 5.
That's right. He is the world's best doctor.
That's right.
Doug White.
Yeah.
In the world. No offense to any other Dr. Doug Whites.
There are some.
Yeah, I bet there are.
And there used to be a Doug White club, and there's one that's a child molester.
I thought you were going to say there were some, and I had them all killed.
I have them in a warehouse in Parsippany, New Jersey.
That's very Rick and Morty of you.
The council of Dogs.
Because all I'm envisioning is Doug with a warehouse of like exact clones of himself, and he was literally referring to I've cloned myself, and there's other Dr. Doug Whites.
Yeah, I just take them out on Sundays.
On the lines are only Mr. Larry Pesce is here with us. Larry, welcome.
Thank you. Hey, I'm sure you've all heard about that thing with the woman with Gorilla Glue in her hair.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other day, I ate 8 ounces of Gorilla Glue. No shit.
Here to warn us of the dangers of Gorilla Glues, Mr. Lee Neely is here with us.
It's good to be here. I have an infinite list of the 5 ways not to use a Gorilla Glue.
There you go.
Line from Idaho.
That coming up in the final segment. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
I'm fixated on the fact that the Discord channel isn't live, but yet we can still type into it.
Oh, I know. It's because Sam's on vacation. So some of the things that now we get to realize all the things that Sam does.
When Sam leaves, time
point
stops.
Of failure.
That's it.
Yeah.
Wait, I'll fix it.
Thanks,
Stand
Larry.
by.
Thank you.
Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
I think this is only the pinnacle of the things we'll realize happen when Sam is gone.
It's very true. Very true. Somehow we'll get by. I mean, barely. Like by the skin of our teeth, we'll get by, and then be very thankful when Sam gets back. Like, dodge a bullet there. Alrighty. Do you want to stay in the loop all things Security Weekly? Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list. Join our Discord server. All at securityweekly.com/subscribe. There's an entire network of shows focused around security and hacking that you can find there. Phillip Wylie is an offensive cyber security instructor at, is it EIN or INE? Did I say EIN in the introduction? Because I meant to say INE because I'm assuming it's INE.
Yes, it's INE.
I knew that. So Phillip's from INE. He's also the founder of the Pwn School Project. Phillip's uncommon journey into the field of cybersecurity is preceded by his colorful past as a pro wrestler, where he once wrestled a bear. Phillip, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be joining you all. Big fan of your show.
Thank you very much. I'm still on the fact that you wrestled a bear. Like,
Yep.
Was it like someone in a bear costume? Like, is it that kind?
It was a real 750-pound bear.
Wow.
Who won?
That poor bear.
The bear did.
Was it like in The Revenant or something?
Was it close, or what? Did he barely win, or what?
Was there a lot of drama, or was it just like, and it was over?
Yeah, I wasn't able to do much with him, which I'm kind of probably lucky I didn't take the bear down, because no one had pinned the bear or taken him down at that point. So who knows what would have happened if anyone ever did take him down, because he could revert to those animal instincts and mess you up.
Just begs so many questions.
Yeah,
we'll have to defer.
So
I'm
how did you get your start in pro wrestling?
You got Doug?
I mean, security.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. Let's go there. Phillip, how'd you get your start in information security?
Yeah, I got started in information security. I started out as a sysadmin back in 97, and then got interested in security around 2000 or so, and then moved into network security in 2004. Spent about a year and a half doing network security, and then the company I worked for hired a CISO, and he divided us up into different groups. Originally, everyone was doing the same thing: firewalls, IDS, risk assessments, vulnerability scans, and I got put on the AppSec team, and that's where I found out about pen testing. So in 2012, I got laid off from my job at this mortgage company, and then went to work consulting as a penetration tester.
Fantastic. And Phil, what is your role today at INE, now that I know how to say it correctly?
Yes, I am an offensive cyber security instructor there. So I'll be creating content and doing live boot camps for INE for their offensive security content.
I've not heard of INE. What is INE?
Actually, why you probably hadn't heard of them is INE originally got their start with Cisco training. Mm-hmm. They were a big CCIE training company. They did a lot of boot camps back in the day on Cisco related stuff. And then in 2019, they bought eLearn Security and then our motor for data science. So eLearn Security is how they kind of got in. They did have some cybersecurity content, but to really get more solid into the cybersecurity area, they acquired eLearn Security.
Gotcha. And you've got some content on or initiatives on getting started in the field. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah. It kind of really got interested in that area because before I started teaching at Dallas College in 2018. And prior to that, I did a lot of mentoring, and then people wanted to get started as pen testers would ask my advice. So that kind of got me interested in that. And when I started teaching at Dallas College, it was a way to do that on a broader scale. I did a talk on my first day of class each semester about becoming a pen tester, which ended up turning into a conference talk called the Pen Tester Blueprint, which eventually became a book.
Where do you recommend people get started if they want to be a pen tester? Because it is just but one kind of subfield in our
That's the
field
most common question I get too.
Yeah.
And I see that question all the time: is how do I get started being a pen tester? And we get that all the time from like people that are looking at universities, and they're like, I think.
I think if you don't have IT experience, I think a good path, education wise, you don't necessarily have to get the certifications, but I think start with like A+, learn that content, Network Plus, and then Security Plus, because you need that foundation. And if you're going to go like into web app pen testing, then if you learn some web development, did something like Code Academy to learn some web app development to kind of learn there. You got to understand the technology first. A lot of people want to jump in hacking right away, but you got to understand the technology. You need to be able to, understand the technology, how to secure it before you can break into it. So people without any formal experience, I tell them to start out like A+, Security Plus, Network Plus, learning that content, not necessarily getting the certifications, but having that foundation before you start. And I even think it's a great idea if you can start in security in some other area or IT, because you need that that knowledge first, because otherwise you could jump in. And I've seen people start out as pen testers, but you're going to be doing a lot more Googling during your pen test, and that kind of slows you down a little bit. So if you have that technology knowledge starting out, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think as I start looking at the various roles in security, I don't want to say that, paint the pen testers as elite necessarily, and there's a lot of, meanings of that term, but what I hear, the common themes that I've heard, having been a pen tester myself, is it requires more study to get to that point.
That's what I tell them.
skills,
I'm like,
right?
that I would call it an elite skill, because it has sort of a culmination. Like Phillip said, he's saying all these things. You heard him say, a whole big spectrum of stuff there, and you have to know all that stuff, because you can't pen test if you don't understand the networking and the programming and whatever components, as well as the security components. So it's like all that stuff combined, and you have to sort of sit on top of that. And I think it's definitely, for what I tell, like beginning students, that it's way up on the high hill of things with requirements.
Do you think it is actually possible anymore? I guess, is it possible to become a good pen tester or a good offensive practitioner if you do not have ops experience?
I think you could do that, but there's a lot more studying that you're having to do up front. I had a student from the first semester I taught at Dallas College. They became a pen tester. She was a mom, had kids that were through college. While she was going to school, she didn't want to take an internship because she didn't want to work for free. And so she just kept taking classes and studying, and then got a job. So you may not have to have the actual experience, but you're going to at least have to learn, get the hands-on experience in a lab or something, at least the equivalent knowledge to what you would have doing ops or IT or something along those lines.
Yeah, I still think from the standpoint of those listening, you do have that ability. It would make a lot of sense to become at least a good senior pen tester and to have that breadth of knowledge and experience around products, different environments, how networks are laid out, because theory is one thing, academia is another thing, and then what you see, the more experience you have with different technologies, different pieces of equipment, different configurations, how different verticals and industries actually operate and are configured, how that plays a role with inside of the business. All of those, if you don't have that experience and don't have that visibility, even with the best studying, you are still going to be behind the curve. And I think you're going to have to take a junior pen test role for quite a while in order to gain some of that experience and time. So there are multiple paths to get there. It is probably beneficial for those listening to consider that and then think about what you might gain from having to see something like help desk time, sysadmin time, network admin time. Those things are critical, and I think those would help from a visibility standpoint long term.
It begs the question, though, so what differentiates a pen tester from someone without moral, ethical values necessarily that's just breaking into stuff? Certainly they may not have spent time as a systems administrator. Certainly some have, but not everyone does, and yet they're able to break into stuff.
But I think they spend that time. They just didn't do it at work. They sit there in their basement. They attacked things and failed, and they said, "Now
read online,"
and then they start reading because they go, "What is this?" I mean, if you just anybody sits down and they say, "What are these things called packets? What do they look like?" Okay, well, you can figure that out. You just got to go look it up.
What we said, I think it was yesterday's show. We said everyone should read TCP/IP Illustrated Volume 1 by Richard Stevens, and that. You can go buy online. You can probably go to the library, check it out if you're old school, and read it from cover to cover. And you've got a fairly decent understanding of TCP/IP from that point forward.
Audiobook? Or do you need to see the picture?
That would translate to audiobook, Jeff. Yeah, I don't list it. I can't do technical. Most technical books aren't available in audio for that reason. That you got to read.
That tenacious and curiosity, though, that it really speaks to the mindset that you've talked about a lot, Paul. The ability to go and have that continual learning and hacking at its raw core, which is self-improvement, always having to understand, always being curious, always wanting to improve and know more about everything. Why can I get past this lock? Why does this packet look this way, and can I modify it? Like, all of those things are that tenacious aspect that allows you to get past the hard stuff, which is the studying and understanding, a little bit about everything. but then having that curious nature to think that evil bit side of, well, now can I do something that should not do, or how can I make this do something I want it to do?
I also think too that criminals can be, I don't want to say one trick pony, that's not necessary, but they can have a very narrow focus and scope. Whereas, Philip, I'll direct this one towards you. Pen tester needs to be able to holistically test the network, the systems, and the people. Whereas a cyber criminal may be just part of I just get initial access and I've got my small bag of tricks that are Windows and I've maybe even developed some exploits, but that's my thing. Is that a difference in your mind, Philip, between pen testers and perhaps cyber criminals?
Yeah, I agree. And cyber criminals are going to rely more on social engineering, sending malware. Sometimes getting the initial foothold's hard if you don't use social engineering.
Yeah. I think it is part. Yeah, I think,
I think people that are like, and not all of them certainly, but I think people that don't go through some kind of like career type of thing that are just say a hacker, that are a high school kid or whatever, they tend to be very limited in what they know. At first. Well, yeah, I mean, they can. There's no reason they can't learn more, but they tend to focus in on certain very, specific things and say, oh, I only go after servers running Windows NT because I know that. And, if I see something different, I'm out. I move on because they have a different objective.
There's still a lot of Windows NT floating around out there today.
Yeah, I'm telling the internet. That's all I run. My whole house.
That's where a good pen tester and a really good senior pen tester kind of differentiates as you're going through this, is the ability to overcome all of those. Maybe the client is mature. Maybe you've tested them multiple times. They've got 5 different EDRs. They've got a mature 2FA and external boundary that's all been configured and tested before. But you always find a way in, whether that's through a printer, something that's been exposed, some off the shelf in-house development that you've poked a hole at.
Tyler, is that what it takes to slow you down? Is 5 EDRs? Is that the magic number? Is it 5?
Well, seven right now is the magic number, but that's the infinite 7. So it's kind of a different EDR and AV in and of itself. So,
but it's a good point, Philip. I want to turn it back to you. How do you simulate the real world for your students?
Yeah, one of the things I do, and one of the things I like to try to separate, the way we do things the way I do things at Dallas College, is a lot of times in the academic world, it's reading and doing some, some quizzes and different things that are not really hands-on. But one of the things I require my students to do is a pen test. Their final project is a pen test of the lab. So through the class, we do demos, we go through the book. We were using Georgia Weidman's book for the class the first semester. But then the CompTIA Pen Test Plus book came out. We went to that, but they have to perform a pen test. So they've got like 5 systems on the network. We have Nessus set up. So they do their vulnerability scanning and they perform a pen test and write the report.
Yeah, I even think it'd be interesting to take a step further and simulate a real environment with users behind the keyboards. That's where it gets tricky.
That would be interesting.
That's where it gets tricky.
I did a forensics one like that once.
Divide the class in half and have
there you
them go at it.
Well, that's the CCDC Collegiate Cyber Defense
that's pretty much how they do classes. I think like ours are like that. They have like an environment where they have servers and they have targets and they have people that blue team the targets and people that red team the targets. So because you have to try to simulate that somehow, but you can't simulate everything you're going to see as a like live pen tester. There's just no way.
Right. I think another thing that's different, Philip, you mentioned they had to do a pen test, is the communication skills required to be a pen tester versus if you're a cyber criminal somewhere, like you're not presenting the report to the client at the end, obviously. Yeah. Do they have to present? Your students have to present the report to you at the end?
No, they don't. But that would have been a great idea. Because that's one of the toughest things, presenting the report. Some of the people I mentor that are getting into pen testing, and let them know, say, you want to be careful when you do this pen test. You want to build that rapport and let them know we're all on the same side, because people get pretty upset when you find vulnerabilities. It's like you're telling them their kid's ugly or something.
Yeah.
You should get some of your friends to go out and threaten them in the hall before they go in to do the presentation too, and say like, "You make me look bad in there. I guarantee you'll never work in this industry again. So you just keep that in mind as you present this crap."
You've been told that multiple times during your career. That exact scene, hasn't it?
Oh yeah. none of them look like people who could wrestle a bear. But yeah. You know who I am? No,
I had that last week. Like, geez,
right?
It still happens.
Yeah, I think making sure that that's another key thing that the Phillip was hitting on is outside of the technical aspects. Like, people think they just need technical skills, and a lot of that is honed to the technical side. But a good portion of what we do is actually understanding business, being able to communicate and talk with the proper verbiage and at the level of whatever executive or asset owners that we're speaking to. So public speaking, business classes to understand different business verticals and how business actually works. And business, if you're doing your own, 1099 or starting your own thing, and then really having that written and good communication and oral skills. The written skills, like technical writing, isn't completely different from anything you've ever written. If you've written a blog, different from that. If you've written academia papers, completely different from that. So really understanding how to write proper business and technical aspects in a manner that conveys and speaks to your audience in the appropriate way and articulates exactly the point you're trying to get across without some of the political ramifications that can come from it.
Yeah, and the better job you do writing that report, the easier it is for you when you're doing the debriefing or reading the report.
There's one other aspect to that, and that is, at least I think there's some value in understanding the business processes, how applications are maintained, updated, etc. I got a different view from being just a plain sysadmin to suddenly, when I was interacting with the folks that are involved with the ERP or the regression testing, I had a completely different understanding of what's behind it. And to write a recommendation to just patch all the things suddenly becomes really naive once you have the background.
Wait, regression testing isn't just pushing it out to production and letting the users report the bugs?
Well, it depends on your risk profile. Yes, users are for bug detection. Absolutely.
That's right. I thought that was like the QA test, right?
You're not jaded from your time at Tenable, are you, Paul?
No, I'm talking about my time when I was writing software that we lovingly call PVWorks. Yes.
Oh, that.
Yes.
He's jaded from that.
Yeah. I'm not jaded from it. I'm just. To Lee's point. And Phillip, I don't know how you translate this to the classroom setting, but I think most of us, not all of us, and many of us listening as well, have been at a point where, as you kind of started out this conversation, Phillip, we've been the folks that have built the things and then became the people that were breaking the things. And when you've basically, I mean, it's empathy, right? You've walked a mile in that person's shoes. You have an appreciation that when you break it and you make that recommendation of, yeah, so you need to patch all of your Exchange servers, you can say that with some empathy behind it, because you know how, even if you weren't the person, I worked next to the person that was responsible for doing that, and man, it was hard, right? So do you go over that with your students, that, having those experiences and empathy is kind of part of it?
Yeah, and one of the things I stress too is when you're in there, be careful. Don't be like a bull in a china shop, because, if you break something, then someone else has got to restore it. You're going to make the customer mad if you take things out of production. So to be careful, and that's one of the differences between like a cyber criminal and a pen tester is, a pen tester is trying to go through without breaking stuff. Cyber criminal don't want to get caught, but if they break something, it's not a big deal. But if you're a pen tester,
it might get them caught, though. That's
it could get
they
them
have
caught.
a different motivation.
Yeah,
but they don't care if it's not working afterwards. I mean,
once they've gotten what they've.
Yeah, I mean, they got in, got out, and the whole place. In fact, sometimes that is just, I call that like throwing the match, throwing the lit cigarette over your shoulder as you walk out the door. And
some of us call that not Petya, but
yeah, I was calling it Ryok myself. I mean, but
if there ever was a burn all of the systems, one has to wonder, what was on those systems that you were trying to cover up?
Exactly. Plus, it redirects.
So,
we digress.
Another thing I'm wondering about was, we talk a lot about applying patches or security configurations. Do you teach your students about mitigating vulnerabilities? An obvious one being, you have a vulnerable web server, maybe you put a WAF in front of the application instead of just trying to fix it. But
I
or is
like
that
to
too
discuss
far down the road for them?
Yeah, I kind of discuss mitigating controls and also tell them whenever you're writing the report to understand the remediation because you could take what you get from the vulnerability scanners, but try to go in a little more detail about how to remediate, because sometimes it's not just a patch. It's like you said, putting a WAF in, some sort of mitigating control, and then kind of teaching them that, the risks, if it's something that's exploitable, then it's at a higher risk for remediation, because, a lot of times companies don't always want to spend the money or time and effort to fix things, but if it can be exploited and possibly breached, then there's a little more motivation there.
I think it's a sound approach to start with the vuln scanner leading into the pen test when they're learning penetration testing. I think it's probably prudent, if you agree, Philip, to say maybe when they get in the real world, that as you evolve your skill set, that you can probably progress beyond that point, that the vuln scanner is typically run by the companies and you come in as the pen tester, right?
Yes. And one of the things I like to show in class is I'll run, in the same lecture, I'll run Nessus against some systems, and then I'll go in and run Nmap, doing it manually to show them you're getting the same things, and just kind of letting them see, okay, the vulnerability scanners are going to find the low-hanging fruit, pick up things kind of quickly, because if you got a really big pen test, it's hard to test everything manually, but then show them if there's a need for manual tools, because there's times that you'll find stuff with even something as simple as Nikto for web app vulnerabilities that Nessus or Burp Suite might miss, or some other vulnerability scanner. And so the importance of using different tools and manual techniques and not depending on just one tool.
It's a great point as we bring stuff in a lab on a project I can't really talk all that much about, but when you notice discrepancies during the test from different tools, like, yeah, I gotta go back and validate that. Like, I've really just gotta review what the tools are telling me and then validate it. And
that's something they used to ask.
Not always running more tools.
They used to ask
run all the tools.
They used to ask that in forensics a lot. Did you validate this tool?
Yes.
Before you started, they used to ask that. Did you verify? I mean, I know it's a commercial tool. Did you verify that it does what you're saying it does?
Right.
So I think that's important in pen tests too. Maybe that you make sure your tools do what they think, or they say they do.
Well, and not using defaults, right? Like, that's one of the big things that will distinguish half decent companies and pen testers, is really understanding the tool, not just the code. What does the tool actually do? What artifacts is it leaving? What kind of authentication is it handling on the wire? Is that going to trigger some kind of an EDR? Is there discrepancies with inside of that, or default strings that may get you caught? Is it leveraging something like NTLM versus Kerberos, when you could modify an IP address versus a domain name in order to make those things act differently? So really understanding the tool and understanding the technology underneath, and then how all that plays together, makes a huge difference from a stealth and maturity level standpoint. So really making sure you know how your tools work, and you've tested that and validated that in your own lab before actually just going out and using it.
Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, you can teach situational awareness, but it's no replacement for experience. Yeah. I was literally just in that same boat, Tyler. I was like, well, this tool is telling me one thing, and this tool didn't tell me that same thing. So let me run a scan, and that told me nothing. And I'm like, it's got to be a WAF somewhere. Like, I got to go whitelist this and then scan again, right? And it's that situational awareness that is, it's just no replacement for experience, right? Yeah.
I'm going to ask Philip something too.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tyler. Go Tyler finish though.
No, I was saying those experience points are invaluable, and you usually only make that mistake once if you're paying attention to what you do. And that's another great aspect of this is as you're learning, or as you see other people make mistakes, or you notice something as you're reading, like, make sure you're keeping those lessons learned and archiving those, because your memory will eventually fill up with so much information that it will fail you, and you will forget, what was that one thing we did that triggered that EDR that one place, and how do you get around it? Like, keeping good notes and archiving your experiences is very critical for long-term retention.
Yeah, and I'm so bad at that sometimes. And just when I think I'm getting better, I'm like, I'm still bad at that.
Well, I wanted to ask Philip.
Go ahead, Doug.
So how do you talk to students about scope? Because one of my big flaws in I think teaching pen testing and things like that, and I've taught it before, is I tend to make sort of black hatty kind of jokes about what we're doing and things like that, and it's very easy for students to take things the wrong way, and they take things too far. I learned that sort of the hard way. And the students learned it too, but there was that whole indictment thing. But But I mean, I was wondering what your take on that is. How do you talk to? I mean, we talk about scope here a lot and scope in the real world, but how do you talk to students about that? What's your advice?
Yeah, one of the things just kind of leading up to that, whenever the first of class, we go over methodology and I talk about the penetration testing execution standard. And I really, tell the students to make sure to stay within scope, even if you find something good. I've got people that I mentor, they're doing a pen test and they find something that's out of scope and they want to go after it. It looks juicy. I said, well, you just have to report what you found that further may be possible, but you need to get the scope expanded and agreed upon and accepted by the customer before you go after it. So I'll make sure that they know, and just kind of even giving some examples, because validating the scope, making sure you're checking those net blocks to make sure it's actually that customer's and that you're not doing the accidental. I've had people give me the wrong IP address ranges for a pen test before, go back and give them the initial results of some scans and, oh, that's not our IP address. So yeah, really, letting them know that, because Jason Street has a really good talk, or story about him being over in Lebanon testing a bank, and he's in the wrong office. They're in the same building. So he's already got like a foothold into their systems. And then they detect him. And fortunately, the client that was having the pen test done talked to the other company, say, well, you got a free pen test out of the deal, and calm them down. But I let them know, that there's sometimes legal things at jeopardy there if you're testing the wrong company. And then just as far as testing to begin with, if you take something down that still belongs to that company and it's not in scope, you can get yourself in trouble there and not get return business. Or if it's someone you work for, you could get in a lot of trouble, going out of scope. And then any time after that, if something happens and they question you or think that it's the pen tester that did it, just kind of like DNS, it's always DNS's fault. So then after that, it's the pen tester's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good attorney.
Yeah, I mean that goes down to the business aspects of understanding how the industry works. Like, how does insurance work? What kind of insurance do you have to have?
Yep.
You have errors and omissions. You've got professional liability. How do all these play with inside of your business? Even understanding business types. Are you running an LLC? If you're not like separating your LLC, you're not getting any of the legal coverage there. So are you doing an LLC, an S corp, a C corp? Are you filing an S corp tax status with an LLC? Like, these are all really important aspects of consulting and how your life will be impacted from a dollar amount at the end of the year if you don't get that correct and don't understand the ins and outs of those particularities.
And I think a lot of people don't have that. I mean that's a problem on day one. And I get asked that a lot by people too about, I want to get into consulting, I want to be a pen tester. And I'm like, well, you need an attorney, you need some guidance, you're going to need probably a senior person who's been doing this for a while, because yeah, back in the bad old days, everybody just sort of jumped in and hung on and hoped that it all worked out. But today there is an industry around it, and that means there's attorneys that go after people that break rules. And I think it's a huge problem. So, I think for students especially, we have to be very careful that we try to make sure the students understand what they're getting into. Because
piss off the wrong sheriff, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, and don't go to Iowa.
Too soon? Too soon?
Too soon.
Never too soon.
No.
It's been 72 hours. Come on.
Tyler, you bring a good point. I think it make for a great segment. Talk about, some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of experience points to be learned from that, and it's not something that I've probably spent tens of thousands of dollars to learn a lot of the business aspects, the tax aspects, the accounting aspects, but that's just because I'm curious. I want to know it myself. I want to understand as much as the accountant does, so I can A, speak their language, I understand how business works and can maybe use that, but B, so I can hack my life better and set myself up for the most successful aspects that I can bring about. And that goes for anybody in any aspect of this. Like, you really have to understand all of the things from top down to do this well. And that includes the remediation. Like, one of the big pieces that comes from experience that is really hard to teach is, how do you offer good remediation? You can't just say, well, you should patch that system. Well, that doesn't exactly work. There is things inside the business or, business units that they can't patch that system. So now what are your recommendations? So really building out a fundamental understanding of how the industry does things for best practices, how
the follow-up, I'm sorry, Tyler, the follow-up is to put your recommendation to patch in all capital letters.
I mean, you can do that if it is actually warranted, but I haven't seen a recommendation that's warranted for that, except for patch your damn exchange right now. That's probably warranted all in caps.
Yep.
Philip,
But making sure that
first you have
remediation
to
is
scan to find it.
Philip, largely, I mean, some of the things we're defining here are, some would call them barriers, challenges. What do you find in your students that they communicate to you are some of their greatest challenges in becoming a security professional and specifically becoming a penetration tester? And by knowing that, maybe that's something we can talk about and help them with.
I think the biggest thing is getting experience, getting their foot in the door. That's the thing I see that's most difficult. And students that are able to get internships, that makes it a lot easier to get in. If someone is already working in IT, even if it's just help desk or desktop support, it's easier to get in if you've got that experience than if you don't have any. So that's one of the biggest things I see is people not, getting in the field too easy. And it would be nice to see more, I don't know, maybe internships or apprenticeships open to people that weren't necessarily traditional students. Maybe, bring someone on for 90 days, give them a shot at entry-level role and see if they're able to pick it up or not, to give them a shot. Because, we've got supposed to have all this shortage of people, and there's a lot of people wanting to get in, but trying to get in is pretty difficult. So I'd like to see more opportunities like either apprenticeships or people being a little more lenient, letting people in. Because someone can come in 90 days, you're going to see if they're going to pick things up or not, whether they can learn it or not. And then if not, at the end of the 90 days, it's contract. You don't have to continue their employment. And then they're going away with 90 days worth of experience they wouldn't otherwise had. And just like an internship, they can go somewhere else and they're going to have an easier time getting a job because now they do have some experience.
I think it's a good call to action. And I think setting the expectation that you're not going to start out as a full-blown pen tester going on site with a customer, that you're going to be starting in a more junior role. But at Philip, I think you're right, having that 90 days worth of experience. The upside is after 90 days, if they're showing good promise, hire them. Stay on for a couple, stay on for a while, or stay on as a part-time.
Pen testing to me, one of the most limited areas of internships. All of our students are required to do an internship, and they mostly do 3 or 4. While they're in school, because I tell them do it. But they a lot of them want to do.
We've taken on interns from your school
but
as well.
They rarely get pen testing internships. I've never seen pen. They get sysadmin, they get SOC, they get stuff, policy, and
but
things
we
like
tell
that.
them they need that experience to get to be a pen
well, they
tester.
do, and and there's nothing wrong with what they're getting there, and that's a way you get to be a pen tester too, is by adding those pieces.
Yes.
And I always tell people, how can you be a pen tester? You never worked in a SOC, you never done any of these things like we were talking about earlier. But that is definitely one of the places where we've seen very little. And I'd like to see more people saying, "Hey, we'll bring you on. You're gonna be like junior intern watching the pen testers work," but that's okay.
You gotta know the lingo. I was explaining to my mom that she's like, "What's enterprise security? What does that mean? Is that like a Star Trek reference? Like what is like enterprise software? Like people that don't work in IT." My mom's a teacher, but people that don't work in IT don't understand not just the lingo, but the dynamics.
When my mom asked me this stuff, I just go, "It's a sex thing, Mom. Don't ask about it."
And then they never ask.
You'll never hear about that again.
I think the hardest part with the offensive or the pen testing side for internships is most of us that do this full time, and most of us senior, like there's very little time in the day or night to kind of provide a lot of that mentorship that is really hard to offer. I've got 2 interns right now, and I'm going to tell you the level of engagement and interaction is very difficult to keep their hungry, new, found passion bridled with some work to do, and the 2, like providing that good mentorship as they're doing it, it becomes very difficult. Garrett and Travis are phenomenal at what they're doing and what they're learning, but really providing them enough mentorship where they're learning underneath of me while doing a full-time job, while doing other things. Like, I think that's where the big disconnect is. Even in a little bit bigger organizations, you have a very full workload as a senior pen tester that's overseeing multiple engagements and report writing and all of that. So really, the ride-along is about one of the only aspects that you can probably get away with doing at that level.
I just envision Tyler's ride-alongs being just like training day.
Yeah. Philip, what programming language? So what programming language do you tell people to have?
I'd say as far as scripting, Python, and as far as programming languages, C, I think C#'s pretty good now because since the PowerShell exploits are not as useful now, you still see some, but it's getting to be detected more. But one language I really like is Go. Golang. Since you can create portable executables and you can compile them on any platform to execute on any platform, I think that's a good tool. And you're seeing more tools being written in Go.
Philip, I think you bring up a fantastic point that, people always point to one particular language, or learn any language, but I like that you called out a scripting language and a language that you compile.
Yep.
Because even just writing even simple programs in something like Go and going through the compiler and all those steps lays the foundation for you to understand exploits and read other people's code that might be compiled versus scripted, which is a very big difference.
I completely agree. I mean, that's
I think
our curriculum's been in that groove for a long time. Of course, our curriculum came from all of you people, so that's why it's like that. But yeah,
I think really understanding like what your passion is and like how you're going. If you're just doing strictly pen testing, like are you going to specialize in Linux or Windows? You have to know it all, and you have to be very good at all of it. And so you do have to have that scripting side, and you do have to have some programming, but fundamentally, like there are certain languages that will provide more advantages. Things like C or C#, some of the .NET assemblies, like those are all Windows kind of geared Windows centric for custom malware. They're very important. PowerShell. A lot of those don't apply to Linux, but you still need to know Python. Python's used, and now we use that a ton. Go is a fantastic example. It's very, very popular right now with a lot of the tooling that's for C2. So really, you can't focus. You really have to understand the fundamentals of programming, and then you have to figure out where it's going to be most useful for what you're currently doing, as well as continually adapting and growing too.
Yeah, I would JavaScript for web stuff too.
Yeah.
I think in today's day and age, everything is right. I wish I had spent more time over the years in JavaScript, but I don't know that I would replace that with the experiences that I had with C and
I mean, it is a zero-sum game at some point. I mean, whatever you're teaching people, you have to say, okay, where does this?
Where do you want to focus?
I mean, otherwise it's like, okay, you're going to be in a 17-year degree program, but then you might, at the end of that,
right.
You
got to cut the cord at some point.
Learn assembler too. Come on.
Yeah, and then there's always that too.
So I have a question.
Some old friends there.
Working on the assumption that not everybody is cut out to be a pen tester, how do you deal with the people that just aren't cutting it? I mean, do they figure it out for themselves, or do you sometimes have to nudge people along?
I don't like to discourage people, and I had this student spring semester last year. First day of class, he says, "I want to be as good as you, but I don't want to take as long. Can I do that?" So yeah, it's limited to the amount of time and effort you want to put into it. How quick you'll be. About 2 weeks in the semester, he says, can I still learn this without reading the textbook? And so I really didn't want to discourage him. I said, well, if you're not reading the textbook, you need to spend a lot more time on the hands-on part of the labs and really learning how to use the tools. And you can do that. I just try not to discourage. And out of a lot of students I've had come through my class, I was really surprised. He got a job as a pen tester. So I really try to be careful not to do anything to damage anyone's ambitions, because you don't know. You could have the sharpest person, you're teaching, and they may have a really hard time finding a job, but then someone that's not as talented comes along, and you just really don't want to discourage them, but they actually got a job. So I'm just really careful. I really never try to discourage. I just kind of point areas to work on, but really don't.
Everyone learns differently too, Philip, and I appreciate that you recognize that in your students too. Jeff?
But it is. Well, I was gonna say if the guy had come to you and said, this textbook's not doing it for me, but I Googled and I researched and I did that and the other, and I think I'm good. If they had, and maybe they did and they just didn't tell you, demonstrated that they found some other way to do it. Because to me, there's this sort of paradox that, in my mind, a hacker is someone that doesn't accept things at face values, tries to figure out a different, better way to do things, tries to figure out, we're lazy, shortcuts, and things like that. And so when people come to me and it's like, how do I become a hacker? How do I become a pen tester? I'm like, if you got to ask, maybe you don't have the psyche to do it. But also, the paradox is that hackers are free spirits, free thinkers, don't fit within a mold. And yet we have programs and structures now to try to teach people and train people to become hackers. It just seems sort of...
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, to your point, Philip, that student that got a job had the hacker mindset. He's like, wait, can I do this without reading the book? And I think shortcut and hack are probably interchangeable in this context.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, though. The bad news is that there's also the student who says, can I do this without reading a book? And then Philip says, do the labs, and you can learn it that way. And then the student says, well, can I do it without reading the book or doing the labs? Because
then that's different. Yeah,
I know we get those people too, and that's a scary thing because I don't like to discourage people either. But sometimes I want to just take them aside and go, there are other things in the world, like I don't know, surfing instructor. There's other things.
Are they hacking the learning system, or are they just wanting to take the shortcuts because they want to be lazy and they're not really passionate about it? You're right. That's two different things. Philip, sorry, do you have a comment?
No, that's one of the interesting things is I offer my class. When I first started teaching the class, I wanted to offer it as continuing ed and credit because there's a lot of people in the community that wanted to learn pen testing, but they didn't want, they didn't have to have all this, the basic stuff to be able to take the class because I knew there was a professional need for it. So I had students that applied both ways. And most of the time, the students I had that really did pretty well were students that were doing it as continuing ed, trying to learn the skill, and over the past couple of years, it's a requirement to graduate now, so everyone has to come through my class. So that's kind of the difference. There are some credit students that come through that do real well, but then a lot of times it's the continuing ed students that are really passionate about learning it. They've worked in IT or security for a while.
Yep, we get those, and they're great. I'm sorry, Tyler. Go ahead.
That's the key, is that passion to learn, and really making sure that we're putting a check on that instant gratification, the instant gratification generation thing that is, coming up from, old BBS forums. You had to read and make sure you had all your questions, you did your research, or you get your ass chewed out on a BBS forum because you didn't, look up the answer or try harder. Someone would eventually take you under their wing if they seen you put forth effort and you tried to learn. But now we have, a lot of this instant gratification. We have this people that want to shortcut everything, which that's a great hacker spirit, but you have to be willing to put in the work and understand that this is not going to come fast. Like, you can't just become a professional pen tester in, 3 to 5 years. That's just probably not going to happen without a ton of work.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to gauge when you go ask a more senior person a question. And they're like, did you try this? And I'm like, well, yeah, like I tried that and like these two other things, and then they'll usually help you. But if the senior person says, did you try this? And you're like, wait, what's that? And they're like, go back and do your homework and then come ask me a question, right?
So I had two questions. We were talking about languages. The other day I was reading about that they have, what is it? .NET Core 6 or whatever, the PowerShell for non-Windows, Linux and Mac. And I was wondering, is that really a thing? Is that useful? Or really should we focus on living off the land, like look for Python when we're on a Linux system or something like that? And my other question was, go ahead.
I think it can be helpful. It's just an extra tool to use but I would think most cases as a pen tester, you're going to want like a Windows VM or a separate Windows testing system along with Linux. I mean, it is good to be able to do that. I mean, because you can even run PowerShell on Mac even too. But I think it's good to have separate. And living off the land is a good thing too, because, if you're on a system, you're not able to upload tools and stuff. So I think it's important to be able to live off the land too. So I think kind of a combination of things.
Yeah, if I see my Linux systems running .NET, that's a huge red flag right there.
Yeah,
you might get caught if you do that.
Having some .NET is super useful. So if you know .NET
on the Windows side,
.NET Core, like that's a handy language to have.
Well, there's a difference between what's really cool to have in your toolkit, as it were, versus what is a big red flag if you drop it in the wrong spot. Which comes back sort of to my other question. I'm thinking as the students are learning and stuff, we talked about the huge volume of knowledge we've accumulated over years. What are we doing teaching students to retain it so it doesn't go in one ear and out the other or something like that? Or is there how do you help them not forget?
Keeping notes. I'm a big fan of Keep Note. Joplin's a good tool. People like OneNote. Keep the notes in there. You're not going to remember everything. There's some things that you repeat over and over again that you're going to remember. But one of the things I did when I first started out pen testing is I, at the time, was using Keep Note, and I would put, when you're when you find vulnerabilities, you have to go through and validate that it's a vulnerability. And so every time I would find a new way to validate a vulnerability, I would put that in my notes so that way I could find it, because you're not always going to run across that particular vulnerability all the time, but you're going to down the road. So you have to rely at some point on some good note taking.
But I'm hoping this is passé. The old school iPad. Darn it.
Oh yeah, we call those remarkable tablets now.
That's for your passwords, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, no, that's yellow stickies are for that.
The pink stickies are for your SSH keys backup.
Gotta have a system.
That's it. Any more questions for Philip?
I was just curious. I haven't heard anything about your book mentioned. I know you have a book dropping.
Yeah, it came out last November, and like I mentioned before, this book came out of a conference talk, which used to be my lecture at Dallas College. Some of the other instructors that were teaching cybersecurity would ask me to come in and give a talk for their students, and then that was like January 2018 when I first gave that lecture. By November 2018, it had turned into a conference talk, and I gave it at B-Sides DFW here in the Dallas area. And then, I gave the talk several times throughout 2019 and 2020. And I'd kind of thought, actually, because I got the book deal back in 2019, but I thought, this would be a really good subject for a book, because, there's a lot of books out there that tell you different techniques on pen testing, and they're really great books. But, if someone's trying to get into this, they don't know that you need to know the networking, the operating systems, all the prerequisite knowledge they don't know about. And that's what we discuss in our book. And Kim Crawley is my co-author. I was working on a book, and I'm really straight to the point. I don't write a lot of fluff. So I was having a hard time coming up with extra materials to fill the book. And I knew Kim from the cyber security community on Twitter. And so I'd asked her if she'd be interested in writing the book. And she had some really good ideas. She interviewed people on, their experience, how they build labs, and then had the idea of taking different jobs and how it could relate to pen testing. If you're working as a barista or you're working in different areas, how those skills could help you as a pen tester. So the book's done really well. I mean, and it's really happy because, teaching was a way to share this on a broader scale. And now a book's even a way to share it on a broader scale with people that I don't even know. You run into people speaking at conferences, but for those people that aren't connected to you on social media or through the conferences, it's a way for them to get this information.
And Philip, you also have Pwn School. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Pwn School kind of came out of teaching. My students, the first semester I was teaching, we were only offering the ethical hacking class at Dallas College. And my students were saying, what do I do next? And so I thought about getting together with them on the weekends and teaching, have an unofficial class and just kind of teaching them. And then the summer classes rolled around. There were registration for that. A couple of people that I knew from Dallas Hackers Association were trying to get in the class, and they couldn't get registered in time because you had to do a transfer from their other college into Dallas College. So they weren't able to get into class. I was really disappointed that they didn't get in my class. So I started the Pwn School project. And at first it was mainly offensive security focused, but then I saw there's such a need for all cybersecurity skills that people need to learn. So we offer talks on all sorts of things now. So we host 2 meetings a month. Originally they were physical, and actually in February 2019, since I started streaming my class, I started streaming our Dallas meetups. And so when the pandemic hit, we went virtual. And so we've been virtual since then. So we have 2 meetings a month. We've had people do talks on how to become a SOC analyst, building home labs, doing web app pen testing, doing digital forensics, all sorts of things. So it's kind of a way to offer that to people outside of the community and be able to stream that. And we put the videos up on YouTube. We've had, I don't know if any of you are familiar with TinkerSec from InfoSec Twitter. He's got some really good talks, and he did actually he's come to my class before and give talks on a pen test he did. It was very educational. So he's presented at Pwn School. And so now, since it's completely virtual, we have people from all over virtually giving talks, and we put the recordings up on YouTube for people to be able to view later.
Sweet.
Any surprises in there? Like, I never thought this guy would come talk about this.
Not really. Now, one of the interesting things about it is I was intending on making this kind of like a class when it started out, but I had so many people from the community volunteering to come and give talks that I rarely have to speak myself.
That's really cool.
Awesome.
Philip, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly? Modified version of 5 questions.
Sure.
Philip, 3 words to describe yourself.
Passionate, friendly, and helpful.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Captain Crunch.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Wrestling with my life.
What is your favorite hacker movie and why?
That's the
Actually-
stumper. That's the stumper.
I'm trying it out. Jeff.
It's a good one. I like it.
Okay.
Actually, my first favorite was Swordfish before I actually got into security. But then after that, I guess really, my favorite, if anything, as far as like series, I liked Mr. Robot, since there was some realism to that. But a lot of the other ones aren't too realistic. With like the movie Black Hat wasn't too bad, since they showed some social engineering. But some of the stuff gets too kind of corny and
Plus, Thor
unrealistic.
doesn't get to use his hammer.
Yeah.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead,
fictional,
fictional, or otherwise.
Let's see. That's kind of tough. James Earl Jones and the mom thing's kind of difficult.
It's an edible thing.
I can't imagine James Earl Jones as my dad. What are you doing now? It's like, oh God, no.
Phil, I am your father.
Right?
Man, I don't know who the mom's who's
Mom's a tough one.
Who broke this?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Yeah.
Angelina Jolie.
It is the most popular answer for Mom.
That is a popular answer.
I think it
you
would be
want some-
appropriate for him. It's your answer, Phil.
It's your answer, Phil.
You can't win.
I'm hoping.
And don't forget, this is 2021, and there are such things as blended families. So,
Or single dads.
yeah, absolutely.
Or it could be a bear. I mean, in some places you are married to the bear now. I mean, it's like,
But you really should be saying Halle Berry. There, I said it. Boom.
We're going with James Earl Jones. All right, that's what he's
I
comfortable
think
with.
that's a good. I mean, you got the
that's good.
voice. It'd be
Yeah.
useful in some circumstances, and it's when you're in trouble, it's bad. When somebody else is messing with you, it's like,
Right.
what are you doing to my son? I can't do the voice, but it's like everybody's running like hell. Can you imagine some 8-year-old, James Earl Jones, your dad yelling from the porch, "Get off my property!" It's like, oh my God.
Philip's link to Philip's book as well as the Pwn School is in the show notes for this episode. Philip, thank you very much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me.
With that, we will take a short break, come back, talk about how to build a kick-ass PC. Coming up next. With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are 2 recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/offsec to learn more. FlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. FlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/FlexTrack to claim your free month. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Our next live webcast will be on March 18th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where we're going to get Linux and nerdy, or nerdy with Linux. Learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats with Capsulate. Brendan Edwards is an outstanding security researcher and very much a Linux nerd, and will be joining us for a webcast. So make sure you go to securityweekly.com/webcast. Register now. Check out the archive at securityweekly.com/on-demand. I think building a PC is very much a hacker thing. Like, you really hack things together, and there's multiple hacker kind of aspects to it, because you balance cost with what you want in there, and you find deals and ways to put things together.
Yeah, you do.
Right,
and you got to make it work,
and you got to make it. You got to put it all together.
I bought the wrong. It doesn't fit. Where's the hacksaw?
There's always a couple of things in your build. You're like, I wasn't anticipating that, and I think that's part of the fun, actually.
And it's always that $3 cable that you have to wait 4 days from
Exactly.
Yeah, which drives you absolutely crazy. Hey, Paul, don't forget.
Hey, Joff is here. Yeah, welcome, Joff. You're rocking the awesome T-shirt. I love that. My other computer is your computer.
My other computer is your computer.
I love it.
Shirt.
Joff, welcome. Glad you could join us tonight, and for this segment too. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Joff, ironically, I own that domain. My other computer is your.computer.
Nice.
No, seriously, I do.
That's awesome, Larry.
Larry, I had to refrain from our domain acquisition spurious activity because it was starting to get expensive.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Starting?
Yeah, not to derail Paul's segment, but I think I probably pay, $100 a month to GoDaddy, where all my stuff is registered. But anybody want to buy a domain?
You got some cool domains. Yeah, maybe in the next segment we'll auction off some domains.
Done that.
Larry, you should look into an unlimited license.
Yeah, buy in bulk. Certainly, the pandemic has shaped how you build a PC today for a lot of different reasons. One of those being limitation on parts. Also, not having to travel and carry my computer with me seemed like a good time to build some PCs. So I actually built one for my kids. The other one I actually did buy a PC that was all together, and actually I'm pretty happy with it. And I was able to get one of the newer graphics cards with one of those pre-built systems, and it's actually pleasantly surprised. For my workstation, however, I decided to build something, and really the only reason I did is because I found a processor that would work, that we'll talk about. So that's one reason why I wanted to build the PC. The other one was, I think Apple products are too restrictive and lack some of the versatility. Haven't been an Apple person in some time. If you use it and it works for you, that's great. I also wanted enough performance to build out lab stuff. Software, virtual environments, Docker, VMware, whatever I was going to encounter in security work, security research, I didn't want to be limited by my PC. This is how I justify building it.
Yeah,
I know.
So you got to write it off somehow.
It's exactly. I mean, Doug and I were talking about this earlier over dinner. We're like, I kind of just built this because I wanted it, not because I necessarily you just do it because it's cool and you wanna do it, right?
Of course you do.
Yeah,
of course you do.
You can try and justify I'm gonna run a lot of VMware and stuff, and so I need
go out and buy a $300 Dell toaster desktop. Right? If you just need a desktop, it's like when you get in there and go, I just dropped I tell my wife I just spent $5,000 on 2 video cards and a motherboard.
Right?
And like why do you need that?
Because
benchmarking.
I need it. Right.
Isn't the follow-on question, what did you buy for me, dear?
Yes, exactly.
No,
Always take what you buy and double
it's
it.
look what I bought you.
Yes. I do have slides too, Johnny. I don't know how you want to mix the slide. Oh, there you go. So I do have some slides. And all of my slides... Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Johnny. So the slides, as well as a link to the complete build that I did on PCPartPicker.com, as well as my slides, are all in the show notes for this episode. So all the costs, the exact thing on how to build it is there. So I wanted hardware that was compatible with Linux, which, I mean, when you're building a PC, most things are compatible with Linux unless it gets weird.
Yeah, be careful.
I also wanted enough power to handle many connected devices. If I wanted to add some USB devices... Mostly my power-hungry USB devices are USB DACs and things like that. I've got a couple of DACs that I connect to the system that need the data bus speed, as we were just having that conversation with Joff just before the top of this segment, and audio devices. Then you've got keyboards, mice, speakerphones, conference phones, all the things. My previous PC, which I really loved, it was a System 76 Thelio. Great, awesome computer. I ran out of expansion slots, and I overtaxed the power supply, so I upgraded the video card, and there just wasn't enough power to go around.
Yeah.
So you'll see here, adding that 1200 watt power supply really gave me the ultimate in flexibility. So that was the other driver behind me wanting to build a new PC. Just talk a little bit about the technology. I really was looking at the AMD processors. Everything I read, and like you mentioned, benchmarks. Take that with a grain of salt. Benchmarks are just that. They're benchmarks. Yep. They're not how the PC behaves or performs in the real world. It is very much a benchmark. But I was researching heavily AMD processors. They've got a lot of new great lines. I'm not sure cost-wise. I guess it depends on which line you're in and which comparisons you're making as to whether or not they're a better value. But I wanted to go with AMD. Now, the newer chipsets of AMD... that aren't in the Threadripper series, which is what I ended up using, are, I think, some of the best bang for your buck. So value. In other words, what you get for performance for what you're paying for it is just awesome. I think it's one reason, even if there was more stock available, they'd probably still be pretty limited, because you can go spend $800 on a new AMD Ryzen 9 series, or even 5, 7, or 9 in the 5000 series, which is their newer one, right. So 59 something. Those are awesome processors.
Yeah,
good luck getting them, because I couldn't find them anywhere.
So
that's the problem.
Aside from them being able to get them, are there any downside to going with the AMD?
I haven't found any. Doug, I know you've done a lot of PC builds as well.
Traditionally, so I have this sort of like now old man bias thing, like because in the old days AMDs were hot.
They ran hot.
They were always cheaper, but they ran really hot. And I've built lots of everything. So I've built everything from servers down to PCs. I built AMDs, Intels, you name it. We built it. And I got into this thing where I didn't like the AMDs because they were so hot. But when I wanted to overclock, they were the overclock kings.
Yeah.
So when we were building overclockers back in the late 90s, early 2000s, totally obsessed with AMD. They had more overclocking capability. You could do all this stuff.
Yeah,
and they were cheaper. They were hot, but I'm going to overclock. It's going to be hot no matter what you do. So I'm already getting ready to hook an industrial air conditioner to my CPU. So
you're using lots of fans.
I got into this Intel thing because we were really trying to build now not overclockers, but we had these. I used to be student contests, and like, okay, the benchmark wasn't a benchmarking software. It'd be like, what's the video game that's the hardest thing to run today? And we're going to run these against each other and see who gets 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second, and so on. And I really got into Intels because I felt they were more stable, but that did change just a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it was a few years ago.
And today, I'm kind of just in the middle on it. I was just like you. I was looking at this recently, and I always look because I try to be fair. And I really couldn't see a dramatic difference in the two, and overclocking's dead. So, I mean, the advantage that was there is not an issue anymore. Right. The heat's not really an issue anymore. No. And
you'll see what I added for cooling.
But price-wise, there's now they're in that there's that Intel, AMD, they're also kind of in the same little cloud now.
So I'm kind of curious. Paul, did you get into some liquid cooling at all?
I did.
Or are you staying with airflow?
Yeah, I'll show you the self-contained liquid cooling system that I used. I find they're pretty much commodity now and tend to work really well. I did liquid cooling 20 years ago, and there was a lot of leaking involved. It was not a good experience.
And liquid leaking on electronics is not a good thing.
No, it's bad.
It usually wasn't conductive, but sometimes it was.
Yes,
I had some that leaked everywhere, and there was a big messy puddle, and it didn't hurt anything. And then I had one that leaked, and there was shorts, and the building power went out, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So
so I will talk about the liquid cooling a bit in an upcoming slide. Also, the graphics card. This one for me, I think, for security use cases, I like going NVIDIA because I think if I wanted to do some password cracking, whether I had just one or two video cards, people build crazy systems. I stick with the NVIDIA. I really wanted an RTX 30 series. Again, I think this goes back to the money that you pay for the processing that you get. One reason why RTX 30 series cards are coveted, but there's also supply chain issues abound. So you really can't get them. So I picked up a used one back in December, and that's what I ended up going with, and I'll show you what that looked like. I did build a system that I could upgrade moving forward if I wanted to. I could add two if I really want. I know you're a big fan of the. If you're gonna have one, why not have two? You gotta have two.
I just can't live with myself.
Right. Storage.
Can I ask a stupid question, Paul?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Because I'm thinking back the last time I built a system, which was out of cardboard and duct tape. But back in the day, the convention was if you're going to go out and buy a system and you had the option to build it, just get as much as you can for the newest, the best, and the bestest and the greatest that you can while you can. So my stupid question is, when you say you're building a system, are you actually buying the component parts and putting it together, or are you just selecting the specs and somebody puts it together and ships it to you?
Yeah, no, I'm buying the parts, putting it together. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just checking.
Yep.
Thank you.
USB again was important to me.
I built a cabin once.
You can build lots of things. Cabins.
Could it do 60 frames a second?
Right.
It's got a fireplace.
Can you play Fortnite on it in full HD? USB was important. The motherboard, I wanted to make sure it had all or most of the USB standards that are out there. I think you're equally as confused when you look at the PCI, not PCI compliance as Jeff would talk about, but the PCI interface standard, PCI bus standard, thank you, as well as the USB standards are always like version numbers with generations, with all kinds of monikers that I always have to look up to keep it all straight. But I wanted a motherboard that had the latest USB standards and as many of them as I could find.
And Paul,
that was
did you add
my first
Thunderbolt?
PCI.
So, Paul, did you add Thunderbolt to that list as well?
No, I did not. Is Thunderbolt is that a separate protocol from like USB 3.2 Gen 1 or something like that? Is that?
Yeah, it typically in many cases you'll find, and I just learned this yesterday from Jay Beal, that in many cases USB and Thunderbolt will use the same physical port, but it is in fact a distinct protocol.
Right.
And Thunderbolt is significantly higher bandwidth, especially when you're starting to talk 4K displays, because Thunderbolt specifically allocates like 8 megabits worth of bandwidth or 8 gigabits worth of bandwidth. I forget how much. Specifically for displays that can't be used for something else.
Gotcha.
So my understanding is USB 3.1, and I just looked it up, is maxed out at 10 gigabit saturation, right? So Thunderbolt may have an advantage on that.
And it's only on Intel. Some Dimitri just said that on Discord. So
yeah.
And USB-C port can actually be a Thunderbolt protocol port carrier, which is very confusing because USB-C can also be a PD carrier, Thunderbolt, and USB-C 3.2. But that depends on your North Bridge and your CPU.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of wacky, isn't it? I mean, it almost feels like they overdid themselves there. I know they were going for that ubiquitous all-in-one port, but yeah.
It is. I mean,
slices it, dices it, makes julienne fries.
All great points because it deserves, when you're talking about the PCI bus and your USB system, do your research and do your homework, because it's very confusing, because the different monikers for all of the different standards are different and the bus speeds are all different. So you make sure you spec that out.
And think carefully on when you're first planning, what are you going to connect to this thing?
Yes.
You know, and always think about the next couple of years, because a lot of times people build something and they say, well, I'm going to save my money. and then next year I'm going to buy that
Right.
4K monitor, and then they don't have the connectors for it or something like that. So definitely, as you make those lists, kind of include your little sort of pipe dreamy wishes over here. Like, I'd really like to add this in the near future. And then make sure that what you're buying is going to support it. Just like if you say, well, I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I don't have a 3060 card.
Yeah.
And, and then you don't plan for that, and then you don't have enough power.
Plan
you don't
your
have
power,
or whatever. So always try to think ahead, because how long are you going to keep this system? Is it going to be there for, for me, it's like 3 years to 5 years tops. I just get the itch, and I have to build a new one.
And I find Threadripper and Xeon tends to last a lot longer.
Oh, I've got systems sitting in my house that are, that are 20 years old that would still be just fine. You can put them up today, but I mean, I know I'm going to build something new.
Right.
I'm not going to build standard.
I think it's one of those things that you need to, when you're building it, and Paul, I'd be interested to hear your reaction to this, but go big or just don't play, because
I agree.
You just might as well go best of the best while you can at that moment where you're diving in.
Right. I mean, you do have to live within a budget as well.
Sure.
And I'll show you some of the sacrifices sacrifice is maybe not the right word, but compromises that I made to get more of what I wanted versus more of maybe what a gamer would want. Might have made some different choices in that arena. For example, RAM. Since my goal was, I'm like, I just really want to be able to run VMs and not have to worry about the fact that I'm also running Slack, Teams, Discord, and Chrome, which all by itself eat a lot of RAM and CPU by themselves.
Which is sad that you are saying just that, because I read that slide and I'm like, he needs RAM for Slack, Discord, Teams. Like, God, what have we come to?
I know. It's awful to think about, but it's very true. And I wanted to be able to run VMs while I'm on a call, in other words, with Teams. I want to be able to spin up VMs and go validate things or run some tasks in the background and just not have to worry about. So I'm like, RAM, max it out. If you're building a desktop, again, if you're speccing your power out, excuse me, there's no reason why you shouldn't just max out the RAM. Laptops, different. If your battery life you care about, you're going to want to do some more specific research as to how much RAM and how that impacts battery life.
Building laptops a whole different animal.
I don't know if I would build a laptop.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like the challenge is to move from what you built to like now put that in a 2U rack case, and let's see what you let's see what you got.
That's
because it gets really weird
when you've got a full. So this is a full ATX motherboard in a mid tower, ATX.
Oh, so you were pushing yourself,
yeah. Is it a full tower or a mid tower? I forget what they call it.
Hey, I go big on the cases too. I'm like, it's going to sit over there under that table, so I don't care if
it's a great point. You should, I think, just go with the bigger case and a bigger motherboard, and it's
easier to work with. Right. Later, when you want to add something, you're not going, if I only had room, get the hacksaw. Believe me, I've got the hacksaw.
I've done it. I use a Sawzall, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I've sawed stuff out of a case. But I mean, I like to go with those big cases because, like I said, I'm not going to move it. It's not a LAN party machine or something.
No.
So my plan is it's going to sit over there in the corner. I'm not going to move it, hopefully, until I get rid of it. And it's so much easier to work on if you can get your hands inside of it than you're trying to work on. I mean, I built 2Us and stuff like that. I even built a 1U once, but that's a nightmare. And you're trying to run.
You got riser cards and
big case. It makes it easy.
So on this slide, this is what I built. And again, I linked to this in the show notes. And I'll walk through all of the components individually. Now, keep in mind, the reason I wanted to display this all on one slide was that some of these prices fluctuated even since I've built it. Some of the prices went up. Some of the prices went down.
Well, some of these some coin.
Some of these, I mean, when you're doing a Threadripper build like I did with 256 gigs of RAM, just those two components alone, you're in north of $4,000 at that point.
I was going to say the RAM alone is going to cost you a bunch. So.
Yeah. And like I said, some of these prices have fluctuated. Some of the availability has gone away. The Be Quiet 1200 watt power supply, it actually is $249. So PC Part Picker, I think, is struggling as availability keeps changing, and I think everyone's trying to change their websites for whatever reason, to keep up with demand on both ends of the spectrum. But it does list for $249, and at this time it said no price was available. But B&H Photo Video did have them in stock at $249, which I think is even where I ordered it from as well. So,
ooh, I like that you put a separate dedicated USB 3.1 card in there. That's a good idea.
I did. I wanted that for my audio devices. That card's actually not working right now. I don't know if I got a bad card or missing some configuration. But yeah, I am going to return that one, swap it out, see if it was a bad card, and get that working, because I did want to. I think for things that we do as security professionals, and also especially if you're an audiophile, you can never have enough USB bus and power.
Yeah, you got to have
system,
throughut,
right?
man.
Yeah.
You got to be able to. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's the build. Go ahead, Larry.
So it's funny. I was I'm looking at this list, and just about 10 years ago, when I was really getting heavy into the IT consulting work and the security consulting work, I built a system for doing password cracking. It ultimately ended up being for running VMs and not having any GPU in it, because I was going to buy those later. And it was my VMware server that hosted everything.
Is that a Xeon?
It is a 24-core Xeon.
Yep. Yeah. And it lasts you 10 years.
Those things have legs,
256 gigs of RAM.
Yep.
And I think at the time it was something along the lines of 40 terabytes of disk, because it was two 20 terabyte drives, which I paid a ton for.
Yep.
And the price point came in right about the same. I want to say it was about $3,800.
Yeah.
And I retired that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is kind of sticker shock when you look at it, but you think about how long you could repurpose and use this type of build.
Yep.
I think it
and
makes
quite
sense.
honestly, that system ran all my VMs and still continued to run the VMs. And pretty much the only reason I shut that thing off was it was a little on the loud side. But not really that bad. And it lived in the basement, so it wasn't that bad. But the power went out, and I just never went back downstairs and turned it back on.
Yeah.
I've got one in my basement that's got 9 Vantech tornado fans in it. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner when you turn it on. You can hear it. You can hear it on the second floor of our house. It's like.
Well, it's a great point. This build, I mean, Doug, you've seen it in my
modern
office.
Is quiet, yeah. All that stuff's gone.
I don't hear it
now.
At
You
all.
got those big frame fans that are like slow turning.
Yeah, so that's actually one of my criteria, and I'm glad you actually brought the noise factor up, because if I'm going to build something, I mean, it's okay if you've got a basement to put it in, but I don't. And if I'm going to build something, decibels matter. I mean, I want to keep the noise level down.
Yeah, and you can research that when you're looking at fans and power supplies.
And you should, because you will regret it if you build a crazy loud. You'll be wearing headphones all the time.
Yeah,
because your office or your living room or wherever you're going to put this thing will sound like a server room.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like my last firewall platform, it was like a Nokia IP 390 or something that I picked up.
410,
and
440.
It was a 390, so it was a 1U case. The problem is that when you put Linux on it or pfSense, it doesn't come with the special fan control software, and it hasn't been ported. So the fans spool up at maximum volume.
So the cat's getting sucked up against the case and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, but loud. It was in the basement, and you could literally hear it on the second floor of our house. Sure. So 3 floors up on the completely opposite end of the house.
Yeah. I mean, you can move. So today you can move a lot of air. Yeah, for not a lot of money and not a lot of noise, and that's one of the innovations that have happened. Yeah.
So something I've actually done, Larry, and I bet you've done this at one point or other, is got like a big resistor, like at least like a 5-watt capacity resistor, and put it in line to a fan just to slow it down.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And soldered it in there, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Pull that Molex out and put that resistor in there. It'll slow the fans down if you don't have a controller for it.
Yeah, but I made the mistake of getting a 1/4 watt the first time, and that resistor went poof.
Oops. So I went with AMD. So ultimately, because of limited availability, I wasn't originally going to go with Threadripper, which is AMD's comparison to the Xeon platform. I went with the Threadripper 3960X 24-core 48-thread. These are around $1,400 for just the processor. Doesn't come with anything else but the processor. The next kind of tick up is a 32-core. That was $600 more. And I'll show you my benchmarks at the end. And I think I played my cards right. And it's just like minuscule difference. So I wanted something
can
modern.
Can you say that processor name again? Because I think I got a little aroused.
I am running an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 3960X 24-core 38-thread processor.
Oh, baby.
Ultimate Infinity Edition.
I do suggest you start with the processor, right?
You should
start there. Choose. And so what I do is I found this, and I forgot to link to the website. Sorry about that. Whoever's website had listed this so kindly. And so I didn't want anything too old, right? But I didn't want the brand new stuff because I believe the 3990X, which is their 64-core version, not only was that really expensive since it came out in February 2020, good luck getting it because I think that's suffering from supply chain issues. There's the 3970X, which was $600 more. That jumps you from 24 to 32 cores from what I chose. But the 0.007 microns, right? You can see like the previous generation, the Colfax released in August 2018, 0.0012 microns, it jumps to 0.007, right? So I knew that there was an architectural change there. So I wanted to be on the latest architecture, maybe not the fastest one in there, but on the latest architecture. So that's how I settled on the 24 cores. And let me tell you, 24 cores is, I mean, it's that's like we were talking earlier. There's not even your software that you're using today often isn't optimized to use even 2 cores sometimes, let alone all the threads and
24 cores.
Usually software is not optimized for that. So
stop drooling over the 4 core one.
So you'll see my benchmarks at the end, Lee, and I'm not far off the mark. There's not, and you could probably read multiple benchmarks. I didn't see that much difference between 24, 32, or 64 cores, other than like a huge price jump. So that was the processor, and that's what started it all. I'm like, well, and the other thing was I could get this processor. Like, you can buy it today, put it in your cart, and they will deliver it to you, which is nice. So I went with whatever motherboard that was. I forget the model number. I didn't put it on the slide, but this is an Asus motherboard. I haven't noticed too much differences in terms of like reliability necessarily, or speed in motherboards. I mean, motherboards are, they're right. I mean,
there's good ones and bad ones.
I try and avoid the bad ones. I read the reviews.
But everybody has personal biases on that too. So I have a bias against MSIs because and some people love them. So don't send me death threats. But one year we bought I used to buy 36 motherboards every fall for my class, and
you had a high DOA.
Yeah, and I bought 36 MSI motherboards because they were cheap, and I think we had 19 of them were bad out of the box, and I was like, never again. Even though I know they're not like that now, and these were cheap. But yeah, Asus.
You got to watch your 1-star reviews of people that said that they were DOA. There's a certain kind of threshold, like percentage-wise. I'm like, all right, I know a couple of people are going to get that, right? Yep. But when you see that number kind of creeping up of the number of people that got them and had huge, or they're just dead on arrival, right?
Yeah.
I like this motherboard because it gave me a lot of options with USB. We touched on that earlier. So I got a USB 3.1, 3.2 Gen 2 Type A system in there. I got a Type C port. I got 6 3.1, 3.2 Gen 1s on there as well. So there was some pretty good USB support on there, which was important to me. It supports 256 gigs of RAM. I don't know. Going beyond that, Doug, have you?
I have not gone beyond. Well, I have gone beyond that on server side. So we have a server that has more than terabytes of RAM.
That was almost a custom build, right?
It was I mean, that's an HP. I didn't build it. Yeah. So I'm sure you can get a server motherboard which have other limitations. Like I used to love those TNs that had 4 processors and stuff. Yeah. But they have all kinds of other limitations because the assumption.
I think with a single processor,
probably 256 for now. That's probably. I haven't seen anything bigger than that. You may be able to find something, but I haven't seen anything lately. Because I did look when you built that. I was like, okay, I got to have something bigger. The 512.
Yeah, Doug's like, wait, Paul's PC is faster than mine.
So I was going to say
where that differs.
Hold on, wait, Tyler, and then Joff. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I said where that differs is one of the things to consider is the Intel Optane, where you're actually offloading some of your memory buffer space to the PCIe and NVMe SSD space. So you can actually exceed that 256 with Optane.
Yep, you can.
Yeah, Optane was super awesome. I was concerned about Linux support for that. So in this build, I wasn't.
I probably
would
be
there.
too.
Yeah. Joff?
No, I think I was going to make a similar comment to Tyler, but the other thing I would say that Asus motherboards, in all the time that I've ever built PCs, and I haven't done one recently, but I always liked what Asus was putting out. They're kind of like the Swiss Army knife motherboard. You get a lot of options with them.
Yep.
And you get to pick and choose, the set of features that kind of suits you. So I think that's a really good choice, and I've never had a technical problem with them in the times that I've used them.
They have been pretty solid, Jeff. I'll agree with you there. I think if you're looking into overclocking, a lot of the threads and comments will talk about VRMs. What is VRMs again, Doug? It's like the heating, the cooling, and fan control on your motherboard to support overclocking. It's something like that. I remember looking it up.
I don't remember.
That doesn't really apply to me because I'm not
voltage, RPMs, and something else. So you can control different voltage clockings to your memory and your processor, which then allows you to clock up your speeds, and then you have to be able to control your fans and variables for the heat once those voltage regulations.
Voltage regulation management, that is how you overclock the RAM. Because
you'll see a lot of comments from overclockers and gamers going, this board has decent VRMs and that and the other thing. With the processor I chose, I wasn't going to think about overclocking it. I don't feel the need to overclock it.
You got plenty of juice.
You have plenty of juice there. No need to overclock the processor. I do need to do some tweaking to my my RAM speed that wasn't detecting it correctly, but I got to do a little experimenting there. Speaking of RAM, I did, and Doug, I think this was your recommendation, and this is a really interesting thing. There's other measurements of speed other than the frequency that they list, and I don't remember exactly what that is. What is that?
Well,
there's another measurement.
They have the read-write speed of the RAM, so that's beyond that 3600, which is just how fast the bus operates. So so it has to be able to read and write. And then there's like 4 other little speeds that come in there.
I researched those at one point.
Yeah, and they used to, you had to go look up what those settings optimized to, and then a lot of times manually set those 4 numbers so that they fit the right. I don't remember what each number stands for now without looking it up, but yeah, there's other things behind just 3600.
That's the clock frequency.
And
what you told me was, like, don't worry about the other numbers. Get a higher clock frequency, and you're good, right?
That helps because that's how fast it can refresh. So that's how fast it can operate.
And I guess my one tip is, if you're looking at like a DDR4 3200, look at that same class of RAM and what the 3600 will give you, or 3000 versus 3200. Oftentimes, for 20, I think you pointed out one of my builds I sent you. Were like, dude, for like $25 more, you can go from 3200 to 3600, right? So make sure you look at that. So.
And the CL ratings, most of those are for overclocking, specifically the clock latencies.
Yeah.
And so if you're not tweaking your clock latencies on your memory and your processor using VRM, then really you're not gaining a whole lot from those lower clock latencies. The bus speeds are going to be more important to what you're doing.
Right. So I went with G-Skill Trident Z. It seems to be working fine. They all worked. And really cool colors. Actually, Johnny, if you've got I took a couple of pictures. Not very good ones. So that's the front of the case, and we'll talk about the Cooler Master case that I bought.
Oh man, you got like a plexiglass on it, so you can see through it.
On the side, yeah, John. If you go to the next one, I actually took the plexiglass off to get that picture. Yeah, that's the RAM, like cool rainbow colors. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time on the whole lighting system just because I'm like, I want to get it together and use it. Like the cool stuff I want to do is, once I get software on it and I want to run Kali and Windows and do cool stuff with it, people do spend a lot more time with the lighting system and controlling the lighting and things like that. In fact, the one from Best Buy I bought my son actually has a remote control that you can change the colors on all the lights. And so you can spend a lot of time researching and configuring your fan and lighting system within the PC. And really, I mean, that's just for bragging rights, quite honest. It really is. But this RAM happened to come with some really cool kind of rainbowish colors that happen. So, yeah.
So I have one more question, Paul.
Yes.
And it's kind of a silly question, but it's also kind of a serious question. So you've got all these component parts. What do you do for patch management?
I update daily, pretty much daily on my system. Manually, I don't have a...
You mean like firmware patches, Jeff?
Well, I mean, whatever my original question was going to be, okay, so how long is this going to last? What's the life expectancy of this thing? And then I'm like, oh, well, and then patching. I mean, there's a lot of component parts. How many of them, that some of them may of which be firmware based, come with some possibility of needing a patch or an update at some point, and how do you pull all that part of it
usually
together?
Just the BIOS firmware. I mean,
there's other firmware on a lot of the other components, but usually the BIOS firmware UEFI takes.
Has anybody ever seen a video card firmware update?
I think that comes down with your driver updates.
Well, I mean, they have driver
updates,
so that's at another level. But I mean, like an actual, I don't even know how you would do that. I mean, it almost like you'd have to take the cover off or something. It'd have to have a port on it or something.
Doug,
I always thought it came with the driver. But
the last time when I remember having to do that, and it's been a while, because cracking rig, Dogecoin, the drivers and the utilities for managing those cards would perform the firmware updates for you.
Yeah, I mean, so you're doing it from the operating system. So yeah, I do that all the time. But the lower level one is just really that BIOS. BIOS system.
It's a great point. Also, Jeff, when you first get the motherboard, the first thing you want to do is figure out how to do the firmware BIOS or UEFI update, because mine was like woefully. Yeah. It was like almost 2 years. Out of date when I took it out of the box.
Just be real careful. That's a good time to. A good reason to do it right then too is if it bricks it.
Yes,
you can send it back and say, I don't know, it didn't work out of the box. It beats the hell out of me. What's wrong with it?
Usually making a big jump in that first firmware update.
And the other one is be sure and read the BIOS update instructions at the company because sometimes they'll say you can't go from version 1.02 to version 2.79. You're going to have to go from 1.02 to 1.79 to 2.01, and you have to do like 5 separate updates, which I've only seen that a couple of times, and Asus is not bad about that.
Yeah, and newer ones are better with that too.
And they do web based if you want to do that.
If you have Windows, it's easier to update the BIOS because when I was Linux, I had to put. Actually, Asus was really good about reading the file system of my already installed drives, and I just pointed it at the firmware update. And it didn't give you a little utility inside the BIOS.
They must all have that now. So you can actually plug a USB in and it'll read
It's amazing
the USB.
that UEFI BIOS has a nice network stack that's available to access the internet for updates.
That's not scary.
Yeah, it's scary, but it sure makes life easier if you want to do that. So, but it is scary.
I don't know if this BIOS on my system supports that, but I had to download it.
Asus
and put
does,
it
Asus will.
It does. It will. Okay.
Yep,
I didn't use that method.
Do you have to worry about BIOS updates on your NVMe drives?
Not that I noticed.
I've never done that.
And I'm not sure. It begs the question, like in Linux, what could I be missing because I'm Ubuntu? When I was System 76, they include utilities in their Pop OS that does all of the firmware updates, and a lot of their newer systems have an open source actually hardware and associated firmware that they will actually maintain. So when I was updating my System 76, it would be like, hey, you've got firmware updates, and it would update the firmware on my various hardware components that were controlled, like manufactured by System 76. They released the firmware for those open source, and they would have the updates in there. So I think if you were...
It's usually like the Intel management engine, which on Windows would run, but for something like Linux, right, you would have to have either a separate application that is then slipstreamed or compiled for Linux to do that, because the manufacturers are pretty close hold as far as how they do their firmware updates and software
Windows.
flashes.
Let me ask this, and I don't know if you could do this or not. Could you take like I almost always have like a Windows bootable hard drive that's just laying around. I wonder if you could just put a Windows bootable hard drive in there, boot that baby up, do all your firmware updates, and then pull it back out and put your Linux drives back. Because if this is a firmware update.
So Windows to Go is one of the ways that we did that.
Yeah,
Windows to Go is hardware agnostic, but you can actually install the utilities in your Windows to Go USB drive, but there are very specific USB drives for Windows.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm totally going to do that now, because I would miss out.
I think that's a way to beat that Linux problem in the modern age.
If I were to roll it out, I would use System 76 because they give you the facilities to do that and choose hardware that they...
I did that on a server once with an SSD drive, so I took the SSD drive and I opened the case and just laid the SSD drive that had Windows on it, and I booted it up, and then I did a bunch of updates because we were going to run BSD on that thing. And it was like, and I needed to do a firmware update. And I was like, I don't even know how to do this. And there was no stack. There was none of that stuff. And I was like, this ain't going to work. So
So I really like the Cooler Master Case H500 ATX. They do call it a mid-tower case, but there's a lot of room in there.
Big, yeah.
It has two, I forget the exact measurement, you saw it, two honking fans in the front.
It's like 36, 24, 36.
Oh my God, these
120 millimeters.
Yes.
These are just massive fans in the front that move a ton. I mean, you can put other fans in it. And those are there for show.
Now.
Those two big fans in the front.
Yeah.
I mean, they're moving tons of air. I also did a Fractal Design Celsius S24 liquid CPU cooler. I love, and Jeff, your earlier question, I love the self-contained liquid coolers. I've used this one from Fractal Design. I've used Cooler Master liquid coolers before. They vary somewhat in price and size and that kind of thing. I've had the best luck with kind of like the medium-sized ones. I forget the exact specs. You get the model number there, so you can take a look at it. They do make larger ones, and they do smaller ones. Don't get great reviews. I don't think it actually moves enough air over the radiator. So basically, it's a self-contained system that's moving.
I was going to say it's like a car radiator.
Yeah. Exactly it. It's moving liquid over the processor, and then the warmer liquid goes through the radiator, and the fans are sucking the heat off the radiator.
And Corsair makes cases like that now too. They have sort of self-contained radiator and everything. But yeah, I used to have external radiators. I've still got one sitting at school. Right. It was bigger than the radiator when my MG was. It was. I'm not even kidding. It was massive.
Where it gets tricky is you can buy systems, and I don't know if you've done this before, Doug, where you're liquid cooling both your CPU and your GPUs in the same liquid, self-contained liquid.
Loop.
But that requires, from what you said, a lot of planning as to how your case is laid out.
Well, a lot of cases have plug-throughs for that. So they actually have a place where you could push the one I built, which had video and CPU cooling. You plug through, and all the pipes went through the case, had pre-built holes for it.
Yep.
And then it was an external radiator. So the radiator was sitting out on the floor beside it.
Yep.
And now,
beside it. Okay.
The problem we ran into that was we actually set the radiator outside the window in the winter.
Yeah.
Which worked pretty well. And then in the summer, we had to bring it in, and we had to actually set a box fan in front of it to blow air across it to keep it cold. Because that was an overclocked machine. It was video overclocked, CPU overclocked, RAM overclocked. The only thing I've never been able to get working very well was RAM cooling. So if you overclock the hell out of your RAM,
so you can liquid cool.
There's a way
GPU, RAM, and CPU in the same system.
I never figured out how to do it. I got the CPU and the GPUs. I had two GPUs with cooling blocks on them. Had all that stuff running. There was a RAM thing. It was like some kind of radiator. It sat on top of the RAM sticks, and it was drawing air up through there somehow. It leaked. It didn't work, and the RAM just cooked. So we were.
So, Job, I've had great luck with self-contained CPU liquid coolers.
Yeah,
I like that idea. I think that's a good one.
One failure. I've done about 10 of those, and I've had one single one and it was just literally the pump motor died.
The video production system here for Security Weekly, I've done a self-contained.
So
liquid
that
cooler.
one dead pump motor out of 10. And Corsair replaced that one. I called them and I said, I think the pump died in this, and they were like, send it to us and we'll replace it, and they did. And
Corsair
they
makes good stuff too. Yep.
Actually, that brings up a good point for the liquid cooling system, Paul. Is there some pinouts that the motherboard can actually monitor the status of the cooling?
Yes, all of that, especially on this Asus motherboard, which is newer than obviously all the other motherboards I've installed. You can control everything. All your fans and liquid cooling systems all have
It's
headers.
an awfully good point, though, because a lot of motherboards don't have headers for anything beyond the CPU. So then you're plugging that CPU pump in. But if you've got video cooling blocks and things like that, you may only have 2-pin fan headers, which will work. But you don't get any kind of BIOS monitoring of that stuff. So now you're back to you don't know what's going on with that if it quits.
Yeah, you don't know what's going on. I mean, and then the worst thing that could possibly happen, of course, is your liquid cooler on your CPU to fail.
Well, on your video.
Then you cook your CPU and you don't even know.
Absolutely.
Usually your motherboard will turn it off when it reaches a certain temperature.
You say
usually.
Usually.
I didn't say all the time. I said usually.
We melted one into a black spot one time.
Oh,
yeah, we turned that off. That feature to shut it. We were overclocking and we forgot we left it running and went to dinner and came back and it literally.
It's a good point. Always make sure that's on as a
we were lucky to burn the house down. I mean, that thing was literally it was like a black spot the size of a baseball on the motherboard, and the CPU was actually cracked. I have no idea how hot that thing got, but it was total devastation.
Yep.
And it was a little crazy. That's called what happens when you drink too much while you're overclocking.
Don't drink and overclock. So power, I used a Be Quiet brand, a 1200 watt full modular. I like the full modular because you pick and choose what you want to feed off of it. And typically you've got more ports on there than you'll use. So if you add something, you save those cables. They come with a plethora of cables. Save all those. I take all my extra parts that I didn't use. I put it in the motherboard box, and I stick it on a shelf, and I store that for the life of the PC. And all my extra parts are in there. If I need to make a change,
very smart,
I can do that. Mine came in everything I put in it. PC part picker, as accurate as that might be, estimated it at 858 watts consumption. So I did a 1200 watt power supply. You always want to add at least a couple hundred extra watts, right? At least
probably 20%. Yeah,
20% more than what your build is.
At least.
And I mean, it lives up to his name. I mean, this fan on the power supply is really quiet, so it makes some pretty good stuff too.
And what does platinum certified actually mean?
I think it's just
it's the stability of the stability of the current. So if you actually put an oscilloscope on the rails, the lower the lower as you go down to gold and bronze and below that, you'll see just like on your electrical outlet, you're going to see more buzz on that current. Does it really matter that much? Probably not. But you'll see a much smoother line on there if you plug an oscilloscope into that.
Graphics card. This was hard. It's sad and frustrating because the RTX 30 series, again, for the value, gets you just an amazing amount of power on your graphics card. And I think it's the 3080s and 3090s are DDR7 and 3060s are DDR6. I read an article about that. I think Goose posted it in the Slack channel. You just can't get them. And some of these cards you're not going to get till next year.
That's why I didn't build. I mean, when you started this, it was like, okay, I can't stand it. I told my wife, so we're doing a build. She's like, oh God, here we go again.
Here we go.
And then I went immediately and I started building to outdo Paul's machine.
And you can't get the parts.
And I was like, every part I picked was like, nope.
So I had actually picked up, and one of the only reasons I think I might have taken on this build is I had a GeForce GTX 1080 Ti that I picked up used for $750 on Amazon. I bought this in December last year. Last month I went to see if I could get that same card because I'm like, maybe I'll do two of those, or maybe I'll get one of these for production and upgrade one of the cards. Not even available. They're like $800 or $900, and it's not a GTX 1080 Ti. It's something else. So I
even put a story up on the wiki about that GTX the GTX 970, which is the cards I have right now, which are old. I mean, those things are like
they're still decent cards.
They're from 2014. I'll take you on with it. I mean, benchmarking, and you'll beat me if you've got something really modern. But the truth is, for anything I'm doing, they still meet the need. But they were talking about how people are buying them now used because they can't get anything. Right. And if you want to build anything,
because again, I'm not gaming. I may want to do some password cracking, and for $750, I put what would be an $1,800 card in an RTX 3090. I put that into my processor. So let me run more VMs. I want 24 cores. So that's where my budget, kind of went to. And this card works great. I mean, I could game on this guy.
You're not going to have a problem with that. I mean, there is a kind of
like I'm running mostly like Teams and Chrome on 1440p. So
except for your benchmarking stuff, unless you're a gamer, unless you're crypto mining or password cracking,
sure.
Honestly, you don't need all this, oomph horsepower like I have. It's crazy. It's stupid, and I spend money on electricity. People on Discord are talking about that right now. But I wanted to build the biggest honking thing I could to benchmark it out.
Yep.
And honestly, if I was smart, I'd go in there and take one of I have two video cards. I'd take one of them out, and I would still be in good shape. So,
you can't find the frustrating thing is you can't even find the older cards.
No,
now.
You can't get anything.
You can't get anything.
I mean, I literally on PC Part Picker, I was just at a blank. I was back to going, okay, I'm going to be buying low end video cards for this high end system. What's my point here? And that's why I didn't do the build. Right. I'm just going to have to wait.
You're better off taking your existing cards and just moving them to a new build and the upgrading.
That's
exactly what I did. This was in my previous build, so I moved it to the new one.
These cards I moved from a previous build because the motherboard died, and I instead of buying a new video card, spending $3,000, $1,000. I just use these same 2 video cards because I was like, why?
Right.
I mean, I want them. I want a 3060 because I want one, but I don't need it. It's like buying that souped-up motorcycle.
If you get 2, I like your build, Doug, because if you get 2 in there like you have, you get a ton of ports and you can drive. How many monitors you driving?
I drive 6 27-inch monitors, and I think that's all I can drive with those cards. Yep. But that motherboard I have will support 3 cards, so you can jam 3 cards in there, and then you could support 9 monitors, which was my original design plan because I have a tree that'll support 9 monitors. So I was going to put 3 more up there.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, this is getting a little crazy and stupid, but it looks cool.
It looks cool. That's really why you do it. It looks cool.
But it looks cool.
Yep.
My brother used to have a motorcycle, had a V8 engine on it, and I was like, what do you do with that? And he's like, you park it and let everybody look at it and go, damn, that's
cool. Right. That's the graphics card. Storage. I mean, storage is storage. You can always add more storage. Storage is so cheap now.
Yeah.
I mean, for my operating system, I did the NVMe solid state. Samsung 970 Evo Plus is pretty standard, 1 terabyte. I think it's like $89, which is ridiculous when you think about what we used to pay for storage. And you can always add more, right? I mean, I've got
that's for an SSD now. It's $89 for a terabyte.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel. Yeah.
And I can put the whole Linux operating system, all my applications, in a pretty hefty suite of VMs, plus some of my backups, from my previous home drives on there, and I still have like 600 gigs free.
My first home hard drive, 10 megs.
Right.
20. I think it was $2,800. It was crazy, and
And the case will support 2 more regular SATA drives in their SSDs. So my plan is eventually I'll upgrade those. I'll put 2 I don't know, 5 terabyte or whatever. I'll put 2 really large ones in there if I need more storage.
Well, I have 2 M2s that are like a terabyte each. One's got the operating system on it. One's a cache system. I have 2 SSDs, which are like rapid, often used apps and things like that. And then I actually have 4
spinning drives, right?
I have 4 8-terabyte spinners in my case, and the spinners are for like storing video, storing stuff I don't use very often, files from classes when I archive them, so I push all that stuff off. And I'll probably downsize that in the future because I have started using AWS to push deep storage stuff.
Glacier's great.
Yeah,
we were just having that conversation, like where do we put the videos from all of the shows? We have multiple. I mean, Glacier's great for that.
So all my old class videos are on Glacier now, and I don't need all those spinners, so I'm phasing them out.
Linux software RAID is actually really cool, and I've done that in other builds too. Even if the hardware doesn't necessarily support it, I mean, I'll just do a Linux software RAID so that if one drive die, I still have some redundancy.
Most motherboards support that now anyway. I mean, you can at least you run RAID 6 on all those Asus motherboards support RAID on there's usually like at least 4 ports on there that support RAID, that is hardware RAID coming off the motherboard. So,
I mean, if that USB is so fast today, you could probably get an external drive array.
You can do that too, or just do a NAS even.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
NAS is cheap now too. So,
it is.
Because we have a 32 terabyte NAS in our house that I was originally using for everybody to back up that runs RAID 6.
Yep.
So,
well, Tyler, you and I went through the Drobo platform inside out in 6 Ways to Sunday. It is a great platform on the Drobo. So, and they're not that expensive either. So.
Hey, if you're running, I don't know what you're running on the system, Paul, but if you run ESX,
Ubuntu 2004.
Doesn't ESX require you to license some extra software if you're doing NAS? I don't think that comes with a free tier, right?
It might not. I'm doing VMware Workstation for Linux. Which is a good point, Jeff. I'm actually glad you brought it up. It forced me to upgrade to the latest version before it would work on Ubuntu 2004. So I had to pay my $100 tax to VMware to get it on there. I actually consulted with Tyler on this, and I'm like, can I run VirtualBox? He's like, you can, but you don't want to. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pay my $100 for VMware. Yeah. So thank you, Tyler.
Your $100 is well spent, and the time you would take to troubleshoot anything else.
Yeah.
So that actually begs the question though, but Paul, and I kind of assumed this anyway, but you're generally using this as a desktop system, but it's kind of a combination server because of all the horsepower that's in it.
Yeah, exactly. So like I've got, for example, today I needed to run WP scan, and I'm like, I could put that on my regular desktop and make sure I go get the latest version and all that. I'm like, or I've got a VM that runs Kali. I cannot touch anything on my desktop, and I've got Kali Linux.
Yep.
I can update that. I can snapshot that. I can royally screw it up if I want to or by mistake, and it's running in a VM. I can revert to snapshot and all that stuff. So
one of the other nice things with VMs that way too is it's a great way to segment host and client network traffic. If you have dedicated NICs, we would always remove all networking, supply dedicated NICs via either USB or onboard that didn't touch anything other than client networks, and that was a dedicated, essentially physical box that hooked into something that the host didn't actually do anything to.
Right. Some of the motherboards that I looked at did have a 10 gigabit Ethernet as well as a gigabit Ethernet. I didn't necessarily have a use case for 10 gigabit.
Yours comes with a 2.5 gigabit. Yeah.
Is that what's in this one?
Yeah.
I get confused. I looked at so many different motherboards.
So that's interesting that you say that, Paul, because at home I'm still running the laptop for my main work machine, but I use 10 gigabit on it, and I use a 10 gig switch and 10 gig into my ESX server.
Nice.
And when you move data back and forth, that really does make a big difference.
Yeah, because you got more lanes of travel.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to do a lot of tuning for that. You got to go up to 9600 byte MTU.
Right. Yeah.
Because you won't get the throughput across your network unless you do that. If you're at 1500 bytes, it's not going to happen. You're going to get maybe 3.5 gig at best. But I can get full line rate speed to my ESX server. So, you copy a great big ISO over there, and it's like 300 megabytes a second.
No, that's good to know, because as we start to move towards 4K here in the studio and record in 4K, we might need to move those 4K files around.
Yep,
that's a great use case.
That's a lift.
Yeah, you're gonna have to tune the network gear. All your switches need to be configured.
Yep.
For increased MTU, and so does your endpoint gear, and then you've got to actually test it appropriately. It takes a little while to get it tuned
get there.
just right.
Good to know. So then we come to the benchmarks. I ran Geekbench.
Paul, before you do the benchmarks, there's one piece of critical hardware, maybe two pieces of critical hardware that I think you're missing, but one near and dear to my heart. And those two pieces are your input devices and your monitor.
Oh, good point. I run an LG monitor at 1440p. I forget the exact model number. I'm pretty happy with that. My keyboard here in the office is it begins with an F. Philco? Is it a Philco? I think it's a Philco. It's in my Amazon history somewhere. And I like the Logitech Hero 502 gaming mice. They're about $50. They're the ones that come with the weights, and so you can weight them differently. I've bought 5 of those. Like, both my kids have them for gaming, and I have them on all my systems. I just love that mouse. Philco Magic, what is it? Magis Touch 2. I forget the Cherry MX Browns or something on there. They're not the full red clicky ones, because when I'm on conference calls. At home, I do the Drop Control. Is that the $200 one? Drop Control is my other favorite keyboard. And I got the default keycaps with my recent one that I bought for my workshop. And I like aftermarket keycaps. I think spending that extra $100 on the aftermarket keycaps, I'm like, no, it really does justify the $100, Larry. Yeah, it's good. It's a good point.
Yeah. So I say near and dear to my heart, because I just did this one. This is the Drop Alt mechanical keyboard with the Red Suns GMK Red Samurai keycap set.
Oh, how do you like the Samurais?
Baby.
I've been eyeing those, Larry, because those are like 100 and change, right? For the for the keycaps.
Yeah, I love them.
It makes a difference. I know it sounds crazy.
We just did the same keyboard with a different keycap set for my daughter for making honor roll last section because she's starting to do Twitch streaming and stuff. But my daily driver is the Mito Laser Alt high profile keyboard.
Nice.
And I turn it upside down. But this thing is it's like a brick.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's heavy, and it doesn't move. So,
Larry, you bring up great points. If you're going to build a system like this, and like all of us, we spend all of our time in front of our computer, typing on our keyboard, clicking with our mice. Choose quality components.
Yep, you'll be sorry.
You're going to spend $200 to $300 on a keyboard, and you're going to spend at least $50 on a mouse. I usually
have 6 cheap just totally cheap shit keyboards laying around that they're backup plans for when something breaks or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you the Philcos and things, you just can't. I love those keyboards.
Yep.
And they're loud sometimes when that's why I have the power mute. So
I like the clicky. I like the clicky. Yep.
I like the clicky too, and I like the weight of it because it's just got that right feel to it. So it's definitely my favorite. And
for the clicky, so in both of those keyboards, I have the Kaihua Box White.
Ooh, nice.
And I will tell you that I run Crisp with a K on my systems that do audio, and it filters out all the background keyboard noise.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
Hey, Paul, can you revisit the monitor for a second? Do you have one that is a curved monitor?
I have an LG curved, and I can send you the model number. I don't have it offhand.
Is it an ultra wide, or is it narrower than that? Because I've got an ultra wide. I mean, just curiosity. I've got an ultra wide, and it's like almost the length of my standing desk. It's crazy.
Yes. I like 34 UC80. I think is the one I have here in the office. Okay. But John Stren and I have the same monitor, the Samsung 49-inch widescreen curved monitor. When John first said, "Dude, you got to get this," it was $1,100. Black Friday, I got it for $900, and that's my monitor at home. And
that's the 34-inch. That's the right call.
Yeah,
because
34-inch
I've got the wider
good.
one, and I think there's almost too much real estate on the 40-plus inch.
Yeah. Monitor's personal preference. I know Doug likes to have the 6.
I got my 327s on 327s above them.
And it's more, but the 49-inch widescreen monitors, you can get them. Samsung makes a few different models. If you're not gaming, you don't need that high of a refresh rate necessarily.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's preference. You're going to pay more the more refresh rate. But the 49-inch.
I mean, honestly, I would switch to those if I could afford it. I was telling Paul,
it's a big chunk of change. I was $900 for.
I was telling Paul earlier, like I got those 6 ViewSonics, which are super nice, high refresh rate monitors, but I got them for deal. They were sitting around in my lab down at school. We weren't using them anymore, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take these home and put them on a tree.
Right.
And I mean, if I was having to buy something, I think I would definitely go off. I do like more real estate rather than less because I'm sloppy and messy, and I like to hang lots of stuff up there while I'm doing things.
You want a good quality.
I am too. I've got a 49 ultra wide. I've got the big one, but
he's got the big one, folks.
Challenge. I'm bragging. My challenge with it is vertically. You don't get much on them.
Yes.
You get a lot of width, which is great for gaming. But the vertical side actually bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great
length
point.
and girth is important.
It's important.
That's why for code and stuff, I use a vertical monitor. I just have a 27-inch vertical monitor that I put next to my ultra wide.
Yeah. No, that's smart.
No, for coding, I completely 100%, Tyler.
You want the height.
When I wrote a lot of code, I did have a vertical monitor there that I used for the code space because I did like that.
Yeah.
Now, it was just a regular monitor that was turned on its side.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It was like I would say, with the big curved monitor. So if I was doing that, if I was just going to be a coder, I would probably go with what he was talking about with the vertical on one side and then the smaller curved monitor, for your just general purpose things. So I like that idea.
Yeah. And see, Dr. Doug and I are very similar in that, for a while I had 3 27s and then 4 17 4x3 profiles up above. But I switched that out recently. So now I've got 4 27s. And
how can you handle the gap though? But
it doesn't bother
what bothers me about multiple monitors is the big freaking seam between each one of them. Right?
I actually like the seam. The seam just breaks it up. It's like this monitor's for this purpose, this monitor's for this purpose, and I've got what I'm working on right now is right in front of me, and I got these other monitors I can window. And I get it, but I actually didn't like. I did try a bigger monitor, and I actually like the seams. They just break up what I'm doing and isolate it.
I think what we're saying is a lot of it is preference.
It is. It's just personal preference.
Yeah. You got to build and design to your preference.
Yeah, and for me, every one of those monitors is a different system that does some different function at a different time.
Yep.
So you've got a natural
my personal
breakout
laptop
there.
and my work laptop, and one that does some software-defined radio stuff all the time, and a Windows box that does software-defined radio stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And one for media, and so. Yeah, so having them separate is essential there.
Just a closing note, very quick benchmarks. I just ran a quick Geekbench 5 scoring system. I was 23,275 on my multi-core score, which put me, according to their average benchmarks, right between the Threadripper 32-core and Threadripper 64-core, and slightly above the Intel Xeon. Again, these are benchmarks, and it's just one benchmark, and a benchmark is a benchmark. It's not actually how it performs in the real world, so take all of that with a grain of salt. But when I had not actually benchmarked the system before today for preparation for this segment, and I was like, yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy with my processor performance. I don't think you could ask for much more for the value and what you can run. So
I like it.
Yeah. Again, my complete build, PCPartPicker.com. Link is in this slide. It's also linked to in the show notes. Again, I mean, you're going to spend north of $4,000 for a system in this caliber. You can, of course, build a system for much less and take all the tips and tricks and kind of
build
personal preference. Yeah, build for what you need, and all. I think we highlighted all of those different kind of decision points in this segment. So not the best time necessarily to build, depending on what you're after, but I went with what was available, and I'm super happy with my system. So I guess that's what it's all about. As long as you're happy.
As long as you're happy.
So Paul, what do you call a singing computer?
What's that, Larry?
Adele.
Oh, no.
I liked it. With that, security news coming up next. We're retaking the term hacker. Stay tuned. Want to be more thorough while also working faster? It doesn't matter if you're on the red or blue team, an augmented reality overlay can enable you to be more thorough and faster at the same time. No glasses, no goggles, Polarity delivers this superpower as an overlay on top of your existing workflow and tools. The free Community Edition connects to the data you care about to overlay the context you need to make informed decisions. Apply for early access today at securityweekly.com/Polarity. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you've got a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your suggestions for guests at securityweekly.com/guest. Complete the form. We review those on a regular basis and are looking forward to getting your suggestions on the show. Also, if you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, you can access all of the content on demand, whether you registered or not. If you go to securityweekly.com/unlocked, you can log in and or register to consume all of the content. And now the security news for this week. I think maybe we'll start with the Exchange servers that need to be patched. Seem to be a good story to start with. I think most of us had kind of flagged that as a story of interest. What I thought was most interesting was I thought Security Boulevard, they do a pretty cool thing where like they take a story like this one that's pretty popular. A lot of people are talking about it, and they find a half a dozen or more different resources, and they kind of quote the more interesting things from the articles. And I think that's cool. Kind of those wish I thought of it kind of things. I mean, it's what we do, almost on the show, but in a kind of blog format. Let's see if I can find that in my stories, because I had a couple of quotes from that article that I thought was pretty cool, and I'm still
it's the second story on your list.
Is it story number 2? Yes, thank you. So some suspect that this is a sneaky way to encourage customers to dump on-prem Exchange and use Office 365, as the rumor is that Microsoft learned of this vulnerability in January, months ago.
January.
They learned about it in January, but didn't release the patch until this week.
Yeah.
And I thought
it's not easy patch though.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, patching Exchange, is that ever really easy?
No, it's really not. The complexity of Exchange is insane.
Also, someone else commented in an article that was linked to from Security Boulevard that he says, all right, I just finished patching our server, started documenting at 9 a.m., had all the steps, and now it's midnight, only because I've never updated an Exchange server before, and nobody else that's left in IT knows how to do it. I thought that's
why this is so critical.
Yeah, I thought that was really telling.
Right there is it.
I mean, that's why at the top of the show, I was like, hey, if you know how to patch an Exchange server, like, we need you, folks. We need you.
It might be a little contract money in that.
It's a challenge to patch those things, and they're live production servers that everybody's going to scream about it when they go down, because there's people getting their email like right now, all hours, and the minute you take it down and you're looking at a whole bunch of steps and you're going, oh, man, and what if this fails, and what's the rollback, and
Hey, change is hard, and when change revolves around tens of thousands or more people who are relying on email, change is super hard. And you can't just be like, oh, we're on-prem Exchange. Like, well, we'll just go to Office 365. Like, that's not how it works.
No.
There's so much planning and work.
Like
I mean, if it was easy, there would be like, oh, yeah, there's a few more people left running Exchange because, going to Office 365 was easy. It's not.
Right.
No.
So I feel for people in this.
Long-term rollout plan.
Yeah, I feel for people in this.
Well, it's a bad week. I mean, it's a bad week for people because they're getting calls from now because of all these stories. They're getting calls. I mean, not that they shouldn't have been patching, but they're getting calls from CEO people saying, why are we patched? And they're going, well, the patch just came out. We've got a test, and it's the email server. It's not. We're not just talking about updating Chrome here. We're talking about Exchange server.
Yep.
It's
it's in our patch rotation that'll be 3 months from now. And
Well, and having full redundancy on your Exchange environment was also, from what and again, I wasn't the Exchange admin, but I was friends with the Exchange admins at Microsoft, and they were like, yeah, well, because you make friends with those people, right?
Well, you better,
right? I mean, those are people you want to be friends with, and they're awesome people for doing that work. And of course, it runs the gamut in skill set, but usually, if they're doing a good job maintaining Exchange, they know their shit.
Yeah.
And when the people that know their shit are going, have like a fully redundant Exchange environment, Paul, is like really hard. I'm like, dude, I believe you. Like, that's hard. It's
redundant email is a nightmare. I mean, it's always been that way. And then we've always been asked that question. I remember being asked that question back in the 80s. People saying, can you do redundant stuff here? Can you mirror this server? And it's always been a challenge.
Because it's not it's multifaceted in that it could be your mail relays are in the mix, as well as your email retrieval and storage, as well as the multitude of ways in which people are checking their email, which could be web, which could be
plus
which
calendars.
Could be POP, and then calendar. You're right, Tyler. Calendars.
IMAP.
IMAP.
Web conferencing, Teams integration for scheduling.
There's just a lot of moving parts.
Exchange is more a bunch of little communication applications all tied underneath a one seamless name, right?
Yep.
It's not just Exchange.
Yep. And then the other part of this course is the question was, are the Chinese in our system?
Yeah. Then you've got
probably now.
Well, yeah, they want to know, and so there's two pieces of this as you patch. Or do we clear this out? Is it going to be, is it going forward?
Oh man, the other question, Doug, I can relate to that. The other question I used to hate was, okay, so you say we're vulnerable. Has any data been lost? How the fuck am I supposed to know?
Just tell them it has, and that'll get them excited.
Yeah, just say yes.
Everything.
Give me money.
I mean, in this article, I mean, the title is Microsoft is incompetent. Is that a gross overstatement?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
I think it is. I think Microsoft is doing above and beyond to help.
I do not, and I'll go on record saying that I do not think Microsoft is incompetent. I mean, they put security front and center in their mission a long time ago, way before a lot of other vendors did.
I'll second that. I think Microsoft is cautious, is a term I might say, because and especially about something like Exchange Server, because they roll out a patch that fries everybody. They're going to have lawyers calling that afternoon.
That's right.
So and this is a big deal. I mean,
they've got the most lines of code to defend.
And you can show financial harm with this. If you say our email's down and it's down because your patch fried everything in our company and we want it fixed, what do we do now? And they want to be sure they can answer those questions. I mean, Cisco's like this too. They want to be sure they can answer the questions you're going to have before they give you the tool to screw it all up. And it's got
to be defensible. I mean, and you can't blame them because I mean they do have a large installed base, and there's a lot on the line.
Yeah, Lee, you had some comments on your story number 3 on the specific attacks that China was executing against these vulnerabilities.
Oh yeah, was that my 3 or was that?
Yeah, your 3 is the Hafnium group. Is that the? I don't know where that term came from.
That's the name. That's the name of the APT.
Oh, that was my number 2.
Hafnium. That's what Microsoft calls them.
Lee, you're number 2.
I can't count to 3 right now. I'm getting one. Never mind.
And all right, bourbon is flowing.
No.
Freely.
It's okay, Lee. You're counting from 0.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, in that case, we're good to go.
Problem solved.
Cheers, Joff.
So your story number 1 and number 2 if we're starting at 0.
Yeah, so they were saying that they're saying that the Hafnium group has been exploiting 4 different vulnerabilities that they found. I've got the vulnerability numbers in the notes.
Yep.
And that they're although they're a little bit wishy-washy whether it's really the Chinese Hafnium group or not. But what I saw was that there's definitely a Chinese-based group going off and doing these active exploits. And in fact, the binding operational directive from DHS. The actions taken read just very similar to the actions taken after SolarWinds in terms of they want forensic capture of all machines that are running Exchange on premise in the government space.
Yep. Wow.
So that tells me we've got a fairly egregious threat here.
Yep.
See, one of the weird things though with this group was that the actions they took for such a, I mean, you're talking about $3 to $5 million worth of 0-day here, at a minimum. Mm-hmm. They took some steps after they gained access where they're just archiving mailboxes, where they're doing some loud credential dumping using procmon or procdump. So some kind of script kiddie kind of actions after they gained access. So one of the theories is that someone has actually done this or someone has seen these activities and they've sold the kind of the idea off where someone's weaponized them. And another group is taking over what to do with them. That or there's very specific targets and they were after some specific information in mailboxes and just got caught. And so now they're just trying to maintain access because they were creating accounts and domain admins. They were, like I said, dumping creds. So some real kind of script kiddie moves with this level
maybe that's
a backstop, Tyler, because if I was planning some kind of campaign like this at this level, I would assume I'm going to get caught at some point, that it's going to get revealed that I'm doing it. So we do all this deep dive stuff, but we have a script ready to go. The minute we see we're going to get caught, you just run this one big script that says, just do the simplest, fastest thing possible to get as much as we can because we know we're busted now and they're going to fix it. Right. So I'm gonna keep working it, but the minute that the alarm goes off, I'm just going to hit run and I'm going to grab everything I can with script kiddie type stuff and just get out. Yeah, I mean, or it could be they accomplish the original, more elite team accomplish their goals, and they're like, well, now what we got what we came here for. So now let's sell access off to some other group, or turn it over to the junior team and let them, cut their chops. See how long, let's groom the junior team. See how long it takes for them to get caught. And when they get caught, it doesn't matter because we know it's going to get burned anyway. But we accomplished, I totally believe, and this is totally, theory and not based in any fact whatsoever, that there is an initial objective that gets accomplished, and then they have decisions to make. We could continue to be stealthy, but we already, got what we came here for.
You got in the safe, and you got the good stuff. Now, as you're running out the door, just grab everything you can on the countertop.
It could be a number of things. Grab everything you can, pass it off to the junior team. Let's sell access to the North Koreans and let them do whatever they're going to do with it, because we're going to make some money. Let them get caught. So maybe it was the North Koreans originally. Then they sold off that access to China, and China was like, "Well, give it to the B team."
China's doing the original and saying, "Let the North Koreans get caught, so we'll give it to them and say, have fun, guys. We're out."
It paints a whole new light as to how hard attribution is.
Yeah, it is.
Right. Well, I still think we should have fun. We could have fun with talking to a group that's doing attribution for real, but we might wind up in a loop. I was thinking that the Halfium group might have been the ones that wound up with the pre-broken systems. Well, the other guys weren't even noticed.
Yeah,
it could be.
Yeah, but these vulnerabilities are really interesting. They're very specific in nature, right? You've got an unauthenticated access or an RCE. And then you've got code execution and privesc, and essentially a combination of privilege escalation that allows you to do very specific actions. So the ability to write files and get code execution all unauthenticated from an initial vector, all three of those, it's like winning the lottery of 0 days against a very plethora of exposed targets. Anything that is exchange on-prem that's exposed to the internet was basically vulnerable to this. And this is all the way up to 2019, which is also crazy.
They might even have at this point how in a movie when they're robbing something, they always know how long a police response time is going to take. Yeah. So they know the alarm is going to go off. So they may actually have some modeling of how long does it take Microsoft to respond to this, and it's going to get out in the press and everybody's going to know about it. What you
hope is that they don't have malware on the systems or monitoring the systems of the people who would notice the 0 day.
Yeah.
And in monitoring the communications going, hey, we're using this set of 0 day exploits, and their intel is basically saying, hey, we're catching wind that someone's noticing that there's access to these systems, and they're noticing that now it's a 0 day and starting to get some attention, so the jig is up. And the reason they know that is because they have intel on the people who would notice these 0 day exploits.
Call the North Koreans
at Microsoft, right? Or I'm very concerned, much like we covered a couple of weeks ago, that threat actors are going after the people who are discovering the 0 day exploits, right? It behooves them to go after the people who may observe behavior and go, wait, the only way they would be able to accomplish that is if they were to have a 0 day exploit for a vulnerability that we don't know about. Then you start chatting about it, maybe within Microsoft or some of the company, right, and going, yeah, we're kind of noticing this, but that communication is being observed by the attackers, much like the U.S. is trying to observe communications on threat actors in other countries. That's how you get advanced. That's the best intel to have.
You got insiders, too. You may have insiders at Microsoft that say, look, here, you're going to get $500 in your mailbox every month. Only thing you ever have to do is if you see something about this, you pick up the phone and you say, New Year's Day, and hang up. And that's it. And then
or it's the other way around. We've got insiders in those groups that are going, they're the team I'm with, and there's, $500,000 in my bank account because I'm like, this group has a 0 day for these 4 things in exchange, and I'm tipping you off on that. Yeah. Right? I think Jeff, you talk about espionage and about how it's an age-old tradecraft that could be largely what we're seeing here in the threat landscape within cybersecurity.
I think so.
You think?
It sure looks that way to me. I mean, they're just applying stuff they learned in kinetic spying.
Same game.
It's the same game. Field. It's just it's like instead of Bond having like a car with machine guns under the lights, it's just Mr. Bond doing this kind of stuff. So it's the same stuff.
I like that we can theorize about things like that in the show. Also, critical infrastructure, Rockwell Automation Software has And I believe we're all talking about the same flaw here in logic controllers of PLCs. What I gleaned from this was essentially static keys that were in use on these PLCs.
Yep.
That if you could obtain, it didn't sound like you could just obtain the key. You had to obtain the key and then derive something from the cryptographic protocol or authentication protocol, and with that knowledge, you could gain access to these PLCs. Did I understand that correctly?
That's the way I read it.
Yep.
I was thinking it was the equivalent, though. If you're going to decrypt with it's always the same encryption key, it's not so hard, but you got to get at that encrypted traffic. But what the hell are those PLCs doing exposed?
That's not uncommon, though, right?
Not anymore.
PLCs are like that.
Well, used to it would. If you'd asked that question 20 years ago, I would have said, "Yeah, what are they doing exposed?" But today, everything's exposed because they've started exposing it. The OT is touching the internet because it has to. Now you got controllers that have to have internet access. Because the operator may not actually be local. I mean, that's one of the big sales pitches from all this stuff. Is like reduce the number of operators. You can centralize them, put them all in Augusta, Georgia, and they're all sitting there managing all your PLCs all over the world, but they got to have internet access to do that.
But they're secure because they've got cellular backhauls, and
of course they are.
That's right, and they've probably got like cheap NAT firewalls on them and stuff.
Of course they do.
Or they could be like the one I saw where the firewall was sitting on a table, but the cable to it was just wrapped around the firewall and then went straight into the network. And I said, that's not how the firewall works, guys. It doesn't. And he was like, oh, yeah, when we plug the firewall in, nothing works. So we just bypassed it with the cabling. And I'm like, well, at least you have a firewall and it's plugged in. I mean, it was like, well, why is this even here then? They were required to have a firewall.
I embedded a link in my number 4 story to the Rockwell secure model. So at least you have some idea of how the layered security should work around these things. I remember when I was first scanning networks, if I scanned a PLC, if I just did a port scan on a PLC, I'd knock it on its ass. So you didn't want it. You have to be real careful around it.
Rockwell's been pretty good in security. Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, most of the PLC manufacturers
have upped their game,
it fairly seriously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if they're deployed properly in the proper Purdue level and they've got the proper segmentation, usually it's not as big of an issue as a lot of places make it. When you start to talk about OT and how OT relates to the Purdue levels and where these PLCs typically live within inside the field, the internet's usually not even a concern. The business network and the business network's connection for data analytics and things like historians, that's where it starts to get really interesting, and it ties back that, I mean, it's a business. They have to have analytics. They have to know how much power they're producing. There's bids by different companies that have access into those networks to see those so they can bid on that power at a certain price during generation times. And so all of those kind of play into that access, but when configured properly, it's usually not a big deal.
Now, it was quoted in one of the articles that I linked to that the researchers from Clarity, who is a ICS security company, they notified Rockwell of this vulnerability in 2019, and Rockwell did not disclose until Thursday. On the surface, that may seem bad, but maybe public disclosure wasn't until this week, but since Rockwell has learned about it, they've been working with their customers to make sure that their stuff is secure. And the security fixes seem kind of dicey. Like there wasn't necessarily a patch or something because of the nature of the flaw. They have to be able to.
There's only certain maintenance windows on a lot of these places, and they have lifetime maintenance models that they have to adhere to by contract. And so in order to roll this out,
they have maintenance windows.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, within a year, maybe they might have a 1 week blackout period, and literally all things that need to be changed and all things that need to be updated or fixed can only happen within inside that week, and that is a legitimate thing that we've run into.
And I've often found with systems like that your maintenance window is when the shit is down anyway.
Yeah,
like. Power's out anyhow, so we might as well just apply some patches while we're at it because stuff is down. I mean, how many times have we been in that situation?
But the problem is though, like that, in some of these cases, they need to be able to ready to spool back up instantaneously when the power is ready to come back up.
Yeah.
So they can't be waiting, and maybe they're also supplying power to other markets, but. Yeah, and Tyler, to your point, like maybe they have that week for that maintenance window, but that PLC isn't the only thing that needs to be serviced during that maintenance window. Like,
yeah,
maybe you have bearings on a turbine that you need to replace that takes priority over the something else, and well, we might not get to that maintenance window on that PLC for 2 years.
And I'm telling you, they're getting into that maintenance window situation now too, where they have to be connected to the internet during the maintenance window because they're downloading stuff and things like that. So in some ways, the maintenance window may actually be a bigger threat than the normal operations cycle, where they have isolated OT, and during the maintenance window they say, oh yeah, we're downloading a whole bunch of stuff, and that's when the historian gets infected and the historian's trusted into the OT or something like that. So I mean, it's a huge issue, but I agree with Tyler that if the Purdue model is in place the way it's supposed to be, it's fairly safe. It's just when you start punching, like anything, when you start punching holes in it is when it starts degenerating, and you end up with a big mess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's scary when we talk about critical infrastructure, and I think there's a lot of certainly literary works that like to theorize about its potential effects, and they vary in degrees of accuracy and storytelling abilities. Certainly, we've talked about a lot of books here in the show, ones we like, ones we maybe don't like so much. I actually started reading Nicole Perlroth's book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get, to be honest with you, like I couldn't get through it for a whole bunch of reasons, some of which I didn't really realize until people that I know and trust in the industry also kind of came to the same conclusions. Robert Graham is certainly someone in the industry that I wholeheartedly respect. And again, it's not all bad. I think all of us that have read some or all of Nicole's book have come up with different takeaways, not 100% bad. However, we all kind of have our things that are in line that we like to pick apart in the book. And I'm not the only one that finds it kind of horrible on a lot of levels. And Robert did get through the whole thing. I could not. I had to stop reading when basically I felt like it was an attack on our industry. And I'm okay with you. If you want to attack our industry, I'm okay with that. I respect your opinion. But when it's so one-sided that you're also not talking about the positive things that happen in our industry, that's when I just have to tune out. And I'm like, I don't know where you're going with this and what the end goal is. But yes, there's things
it's
that we can
using that journalistic fact voice, right? Like the journalistic fact voice that definitively says this is how it is, without doing enough research and or countering with what the caveats to that are.
Right. It's like pointing out that there's not enough diversity in cybersecurity without talking about all of the efforts we have to promote diversity in our industry. And I'm not saying there isn't a problem with diversity, because there certainly is. But there's also people like myself and all of us on the show and many of us listening that are working to create more diversity in this industry. And that's one thing I didn't appreciate. Also, there's just glaring things that just flat out aren't true in the book that not only were pointed out by myself when I listened to the book, as well as Robert Graham, but as well as Halvar Flake's review, which I also linked to, points out several more inaccuracies, in addition to Halvar captured it directly. And I think it was something that was in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite verbalize, and it was hyperbole. It was like sensationalizing things for the sake of sensationalizing things and taking away that there's both sides to that thing you're sensationalizing, right? Like saying that the U.S. has more cyber weapons than everyone else and is more advanced, or even the opposite, or whatever it was. Like those polarizing statements inside of this work, I think, is what a lot of people are taking issue with. So the fact that two people who I respect have also pointed out inaccuracies, and a lot more has been said on other forums about this book. I don't think it's a positive thing. Yeah. First of all, being able to protect our critical infrastructure and improve our cybersecurity as a nation, but also promote what is good and working on what is good and what we're improving upon in the industry. But I'm kind of torn. Like now that I say that, like, are people going to go listen or read the book because we're talking about it?
But that's what sells newspapers too.
But it might be what sells it, and I do want you to read it and form your own opinions as well. and having, I am an author, and maybe I'll write a book someday too. But I guess I do encourage that people do read it or listen to it and inform your own opinions. I don't want to form your opinion for you. I do also want to say, before I turn over to others for commentary, I don't know if you guys have read the book or not, but David Sanger was Nicole's colleague at, is it the New York Times? I believe it's New York Times. Yeah. And he wrote a book called The Perfect Weapon. I like that book. I didn't have any issues with that book. I didn't 100% fact check everything in David's book. But from what I listened to, I thought it was pretty good. I thought he did a pretty good job of writing a book. I was informed, entertained, and I liked his take. One of the things I liked about David Sanger's book was he recounts word for word his interviews with President Trump at the time. And I was like, oh, okay, and he can have his commentary on that, and that's his opinion, and I respect that. But the fact that you could listen to his transcript, those were the questions that were asked. That was President, even before he was president. That was his response, and you can form your own opinions about that. I thought that was a great thing to put into a book. You let people form their own opinions.
That's a good book, yeah. I like that book.
And I thought it was good.
So I think I just missed something that you were talking about diversity in the cybersecurity industry. What did I miss, Paul? Just refresh me. I was distracted.
Nicole was talking about experiences she had going to conferences with people who, not only that I know, but people I've worked for, and it just kind of painting that in a negative light. And I'm like, the people that you went out to dinner with that you described, this is when I had to stop listening. I'm like, they're good people. And not only that, they weren't talking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu. They I know they were into rock climbing, in other things. It was not my experience with and again, she talked about people who, not only that I know, I've worked for those people, and I have a great working relationship with those people. And it was just not my opinion of those people. And she had a different opinion, and I thought it was wrong. Now, I mean, not that her opinion can be wrong, but I didn't have the same opinions as she did about that.
I just want to make a couple of quick comments, and they're driven based on my recent experiences. So we did a little bit of work on the diversity issue at Black Hills, really in the Wild West Hack and Fest side of the house where we're training. And what we discovered looking at the demographics is the diversity issue in cybersecurity, the most underrepresented demographic group is women, flat out, right? I mean, that's a fact right now. And so slight humble brag here, but whenever I train, I am giving money to groups that support women in cybersecurity. That's my charitable contribution. Right. And I encourage others, do something about it. If you are aware of something and you want to get active, then get active.
Yes. And I think that was my issue, Joff, is that, you're making a conscious effort to improve that in your actions. We are as well. We want to bring people like that on the show. We want to bring women's groups on the show like we have in the past and will continue to do. And that was something that it was that one-sided kind of painting the picture of there's a diversity issue, but not talking about things that you're doing, things that we're doing, things that others are doing to promote diversity in the field. That was my issue. Yeah.
Exactly. And by the way, there is a lot of great, I'm not going to promote any particular one, but there's a lot of great groups out there that are promoting training for girls at young ages in cybersecurity, training for women, changing careers into cybersecurity. Yes. So you just have to get in contact with these people and actually start supporting them.
We've had many of them on the show, and we'll continue to have them on the show.
I was going to say, we talked to, oh my God, Miss Doggy. What's her first name?
Chloe.
Chloe. We talked to Chloe. She's a classic example. She's got a group out in San Francisco that's actually supporting this, and there's plenty others around the country.
Absolutely. So again, read the book, form your own opinions, but continue to evangelize the good things that are happening in the industry, and continue to promote fact.
So
and continue to do good things.
Yes.
Paul, you mentioned the book, and I shortly thereafter went and bought it on Audible. And I was hesitant at the time just because you'd kind of given it a bad rap a little bit, and now I'm seeing all these other reviews about the hyperbole and just the reading people wrong, and
it's not all bad. I should say it is not all bad.
But it's not. I'm going to go listen to it. But as we're sitting here, I'm like, is there any way that I can return this book on Audible? Because I almost feel bad for giving the publisher the money and her and her royalties for my purchase. But I'm in it now. She's got the money, or she'll have the money, and might as well read it.
Listen to it and form my opinions.
I'll tell you what, Larry, send it to me when you're done with it. So we've only spent the money once.
Can you do that with Audible? I wish you could. You can do that with a physical book. I know, right?
Yeah. Maybe I can gift. I'll look into that. See if I can gift it to you. More options. Give as a gift.
Turn it on and leave the Zoom channel open.
There you go.
Somewhat related.
Export as MP3.
Larry can read the whole book into Zoom. So
I loved this article. My article number 9: hacking is not a crime, and the media should stop using hacker as a pejorative. I just want to say props to Alyssa Miller.
Yes.
She was on episode 186 of Enterprise Security Weekly. I love Alyssa. She's awesome. Awesome interview, and just she's doing great things in our field. One of the things she's doing is helping us reclaim the term hacker, right?
And pejorative, Paul. That's a really big word.
It's a big. Alyssa's way smarter than I am. She uses word. I mean, so I just want to read a snippet from her monologue on. She says, using the term hacker to describe cyber criminals is an unfortunate habit that plagues modern media. The accompanying imagery of hoodie-clad individuals hunched over computer displays in darkened rooms exacerbates the issue. The predominance of associating hacker with cyber criminals has exploded as cyber attacks and breaches have become regular topics in mainstream media. However, using hacker in such a pejorative manner is perilous, both for its lack of precision and the counterproductive impact it can have on society. I could not have put it any better myself. Very, very well.
There you go.
Well put. I mean, I don't know that I have anything right. And there's Larry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Enabling stereotypes as we
enabling stereotypes. But I mean, bravo. I could not have put it better myself.
So done, early Larry. Last year, before COVID, I actually sat in a bar with Alyssa and had a few drinks, and it was one of the best conversations I've ever had. Alyssa, if you're listening or if you listen later, it was great to sit with you. And she's just a fun person and really driven and doing great things in the industry. So
yeah, and really captured, I think, what many of us kind of hold true to our ideals and beliefs about the term hacker, and summarized it well. So make sure you go read that article and continue this narrative.
I have to confess, Paul. When you had the teaser about the term hacking, I assumed that you were going to be talking to Phil about that, because he's one of the founders of Hacking is Not a Crime.
Yes.
Along with Chloe. I didn't realize it was a news story because we didn't talk to him about that.
I know
at all.
We should have, Jeff. Yeah.
It's a missed opportunity. And so I apologize for not nudging you about that.
Well, we'll just have to have Philip back. So,
yeah.
Or on a different show.
And Chloe, I just got to say this, okay? Chloe, if you listen to this show later, I'm so sorry, I forgot your first name.
All right, that's the second time you've done it, Jeff. If you're talking to somebody, they're listening to the show now, not later, regardless of when it is. Think about
it. Chloe, I'm right there with you, Chloe. You know it.
Jeff, you did a great interview on Security and Compliance Weekly. You had. Now I can't remember his name. He went by so many different monikers. Corrupt.
JT.
And the folks from
John Lee.
And
the folks from Hacker Valley
Studio. I thought also captured kind of that hacker spirit as well. That was a great interview, by the way. I did listen. I thought it was awesome.
And the term hacker originally meant like a programmer or an engineer who solves problems. It was not.
It goes back to PDP-1s and model trains and MIT.
It got co-opted, because of Hollywood and all this stuff. And
but Jeff, I just wanted to talk briefly about that episode because I thought it was really one to point out to our listeners.
I knew you'd like to. It was one of our better ones.
It was. It was very good.
And I knew you would love it when he started talking hip hop.
And I loved his angle on hip hop. That early hip hop artists were really kind of hacking music, essentially, right? In many different ways. It was a great parallel.
Well, and that, so that sort of touches on, Doug just said the term hacker has been co-opted, and it's been co-opted so many times I've lost count. And back, I used to say 25 years ago, but it's getting closer to 30 years ago, which is very depressing. We had three terms. There was freakers who did the stuff on the phones. There was hackers, the good guys, and there was crackers, the bad guys. And for a minute, we tried to correct people and say, no, we're the good guys. We're the hackers. The crackers are the bad guys. And then it got tired and old and boring. And it's like, why bother? Just, go off and think what you want. I guess so part of this is like, ho-hum, whatever, black hoodie. I put up a picture. I cleaned my closet over the weekend, and I put up my dozen black hoodies that I've gotten from various conferences. Like, do I lose street cred if I put them on hangers and hang them in a closet?
Yes, you do.
So that's how that's thank you for somebody finally acknowledging that. I guess I object more to, and I sort of asked the rhetorical question on the Discord while we were interviewing Phil. I mean, is a hacker a pen tester always? Is that their one career path in life? Are pen testers all hackers? And we've had this discussion before. I mean, the whole premise of the book Tribe of Hackers is there's people that are doing amazing things. They're not all the pen testers in this industry. And so I have more objections to the hacking term not being, it's projecting the wrong image. We're good guys, not bad guys. I object more to it being used sort of as an umbrella term for that part of the industry that leads to only one thing. You can be a hacker and do so many things, and it's not even a computer thing at the end of the day.
It's not.
No, it's not. Yeah. No, I agree with you, Jeff. It's overused, overapplied in a poor, negative sense by media. I think too often. I suppose it's up to us to step up and explain. Guys, there's a distinction here. I would love to see, and maybe we can volunteer Dave Kennedy for this, by the way, because he loves going on CNN and stuff. Maybe we could have somebody step up and say, let me give you some definitions about what the good guys are doing in the industry and what we call ourselves, and start there, and then sort of pan out from there.
I think
the shadier parts of the industry.
A pen tester is a hacker, but a hacker's not necessarily a pen tester.
I agree.
Because there's people on the blue team, there's people outside of computers and technology that are certainly hackers, and that term, yes, applies to some of what we do, but also applies outside of what we do. And I think we need to make sure that preserve that.
In that sense, Paul, I mean, think of all the hacker conferences that glorify dropping an O-Day live, talking about the latest cool thing you've done. We are just as guilty as the media. We in the what we call
abusing the term.
Community.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a blanket abuse of the term that we need to correct.
That was kind of what I mentioned to Philip earlier too, was about how when you're teaching classes and things, it's very easy to sort of slip into this like, haha, this was something I did, and let me tell you about this. And everybody, perks up because they want to hear, stories about exploits and, I was able to do this. So I think we have that's a place where that kind of stuff starts, and you sort of glorify the idea of it, because I think we all kind of glorify that idea of the black hat hacking stuff, even if we don't mean it that way. But there was a brief period when they started trying to call white hat hackers whackers. Did not fly.
Well, thank God that didn't stick. So
what could possibly
You should go watch Security and Compliance Weekly, episode 62, where we interviewed John Lee. And I had such a great time talking to him off air. I probably talked to him longer off air than I did on air, just because we're from the same generation. I mean, we're, call me an OG, whatever. But I mean, we were hacking in the, late 80s, early 90s. So, we just sort of were on different sides. But that was kind of fun because I was like, we've probably been to the same places, just not at the same time, same reasons.
Not wearing the same collar hat, but he addresses that in the interview.
He addresses that, so. and that's what I wanted to pick up on because Doug mentioned it. He's like, forget the white hat, black hat. I'm a hacker, and I'm kind of the same mind. I don't need a qualifier. I'm a hacker. I identify as a hacker. I haven't broken into a computer in over 15 years. But I still identify as a hacker, and I don't have terms.
My only issue with the interview is I just wish you had a warning about use of foul language. I don't care that there was foul language used. However, like myself and many others, you might be listening in the car with your children, and you just need to know that there's foul language.
Producers of the show could add something at the beginning of it.
When I was in the car with my child, there was all the foul language was coming from me. So.
Right? Yeah. And then it depends on the age of your children.
It's all coming from his middle kid, but that's another story.
Mostly the wife. I mean, he learned that from the wife, not me. Yeah, so if you're going to go back and listen to the interview, just note there is foul language. Again, there is a lot of it, but it's not offensive. You just need to know that, and I want to allow our audience to make that decision as to the setting that you listen to it. But
let me say one more thing, Paul. We're sitting here calling it foul language. I mean, you're somewhat familiar with the hip hop culture and where the origins are. It was not foul language. No. It was the language of the street.
Yeah, it was. There is a definite distinction between the different types of language. There was curse words used, but it was not.
There were curse words,
not in an offensive manner, so to speak.
I feel awful now because I think I'm the source of a lot of that foul language. So sorry, kids.
Yeah, it happens.
And the irony in Jeff's comments that he says he didn't need labels, yet he called himself an LG, and I just call him old. So.
Yeah, I'm an
old. I don't like that term OG. I really don't like that term OG. Right? Tyler told me that.
Well, when you get old enough, you're too damn young, Joff.
No, I thought it was original gangsta. That's what I thought it was.
Oh, there we go. Now we're talking.
It wasn't old. It was original.
Oh gosh,
original gangsta.
Yeah. So
there we go.
Original sounds a lot better than old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I didn't call myself OG first. Other people call me OG. I'm just repeating.
Fair. There you go.
Fair enough.
Okay, there is a complimentary side of that, right? I'm going to throw Tyler under the bus again. Because I love him so much. He actually came to my town one time, and I came over to a party that he was at, and we hung, and he called me a legit OG. That's much more complimentary.
Wow.
Right?
As opposed to those fake OGs.
He must have been really drunk.
Yeah, he was pretty plastered.
I do want to say...
where did Tyler go? Is he still here?
He's there. He's sitting over there. He's got that look that he has when he calls you legit OG.
He knows.
But Tyler, my story number 11, I think, is near and dear to your heart in being able to glean information from photos. And I think it's kind of an interesting transition. This is a hacker thing that we as hackers may look at an image and go, hey, what information can I glean from that? How can I be creative in analyzing what's in that photo to collect information that could be, I mean, we don't want to phrase it as like used against that person, but could derive information that could be used for attacks. And we as, I think, ethical hackers, right, kind of take that as a warning to people to say, hey, when you share photos online or via Zoom calls or whatever conferencing technology you're using, be mindful of what is in the background, because us as ethical hackers may message you privately and go like, hey, there was something in that photo that, like, it may seem innocuous to you, but other people could use that for harm. There are other people who are not ethical that are just going to use that for harm without telling you. And my article number 11, I don't remember where it was picked up by a threat post and others, talks about the analysis of images of home working environments and how they've revealed work email inboxes, internal emails, names of people, private web pages, and sensitive information. Joff, what's funny, and everyone that posts pictures in Discord, you posted a picture of your new microphone on your desk. And like I was analyzing, because I had just read the story, so I was analyzing it. and there was dental floss.
You don't look at the foreground. You look at
everything
else.
in the background, right? There it is.
Yeah.
There's the dental floss, right? Joff's holding it up. Hold it up again for the camera. There was dental floss. And I'm like, oh.
I am very serious about my dental health.
There you go. Joff's root password is Oral B.
There you go. Right? But
he's an OB hacker.
Joff did one of these not that long ago, and he had the keys to his truck sitting on the desk, and I'm like,
you mean these?
Zoom.
Oh, we have you now.
We got you now, right? You can reproduce a key.
Yeah, from a picture. Yeah,
from a picture. So there's things that we as hackers derive from these images that folks may not realize that aren't in security or technology that are possible from.
We were telling people that a long time ago doing audits, and just like I literally got network passwords with a telescope. Yep. We were looking at the windows of the building from across the street, and we saw, people had passwords.
It's an education thing. My wife, she loves to do home improvement projects. That's her hobby, and I've totally embraced it. She likes to just do all kinds of home. She follows people on Instagram that are doing home projects, and she knows from being married to me and with me for so long that every time she posts a picture to social media, she's looking in the background to make sure there's nothing in the background that may disclose any kind of personal information about ourselves. And I have to say, props to my wife. She's done a great job of doing that. It's not easy because we also now have to monitor our kids' social media accounts, and we both follow our kids on social media, whether it's TikTok or YouTube or Instagram. I mean, they have accounts. We want them to have access to technology. We educate them. But I'm like, dude, like, what's in the background? And every once in a while, I'm like, dude, you got to take that down. Like, because there's something in the background that may be used against us, and although maybe unlikely, got to take that one down, right? And it's interesting. How do we get the general public to be in tune with that? I think that's what we're seeing in this article is how do we get people to be mindful of that? That's super hard.
I've pointed it out to people in Zoom meetings when they had stuff like that, and I think just all out of band, I just like texted them and said, I just want to let you know that people capture these things. They've got endless time to scrutinize these things after the fact. Yeah. And I said, I know not everybody thinks this way, but to me, it's like a magic show. You're always trying to look where they don't want you to see what's going on. And I was like, you really need to look at your background because in your background, I can see. Like
your pet came in frame, but they have a collar with what the pet's name is. And now I'm going to start guessing passwords.
Or just even, pictures of your family and stuff like that. I mean, or the name of your kid's school. I saw the other day, I pointed to somebody.
Favorite sports team.
Yeah. I wasn't even thinking passwords. I was thinking more like physical threats. I was like, you realize that there was 100 people in this meeting, and in the background, you can see your whole family with your kids' names in the picture and the name of the school they're attending because they had like a school photo hanging there.
But a lot of decor in the home gets really personal. Like, I had a serious conversation with my wife when she, made up a picture with all of the significant dates, right? Date we got married, dates we were born, dates our kids were born. And,
I have all that.
Yeah, but like it's hanging in our home. And I'm like, that can never be posted online. Right. That could never be in frame in a picture, right? So it's like in a hallway in a place you would never take a picture. But like we think that way. How do we get everyone else to think that way? And
you just have to point it out. I mean, you have to teach them.
When my kids were teenagers, we went through much the same discussion with the pictures that they would put in their Facebook pages. Be sensitive about not only the background, but what you're wearing, locations, all the stuff that you can identify.
Take your degrees down.
Yeah, take your degree. Exactly.
I'm in lots of meetings with professors, and you look in the background, they got all their college degrees hanging there on the wall. I'm like, oh, you went to there, and you went to there, and you went to there. I know where you went to school, and I'm just
wait. Let me turn my background off.
I
mean, sometimes it works to the good because people shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at. I got to be careful what I say, but like an insurance claim, and you find the people's social media, and you find that what they've posted actually hurts their case, not helps it.
Oh, yeah.
And in that case, I'm like, that can be a positive thing. That can uncover and certainly help with fraud cases, right? So in one case, it can help uncover fraud, right? Mm-hmm. But in some cases, it can be used by
It was something we did when we were doing PI work, was to go to their social media pages. Because you got a person. We had one. We had a person. He said, "I'm permanently disabled. I can no longer work. I need this big settlement." And one of the first things this PI guy I was working with, I was doing PI training, and he said, how can we find this out? And I said, let's go to his MySpace page. And we went there, and guess what? He's got pictures of him playing golf.
Pictures and videos that I have.
He had a water skiing picture.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, come on. We were looking at the dates on it, and the guy was like, these could be old. And I'm like, no, look, the date's right there. It was like last week. The guy, after he was hurt, he said he's water skiing, and he's got a picture of him water skiing. And
people love to share things about their lives on social media.
Oh, yeah.
And in this case, it's good because you uncover fraud.
Yeah.
Lee's got a
and that's how we find a lot of the missing persons things. Like I was working on something this weekend for a missing persons case, and social media right now is so prevalent. Like even if you have physical access to accounts and cell phones, like there's little details within inside of that can actually turn a case pretty quickly. And so it does have some good, but that also is a privacy concern. I mean, we use it all the time for getting badges, understanding what network software you're using in an environment, looking at, people share their screens all the time. We end up with like competitors' bids because someone shared their screen and didn't do it right. Like these are things you have to think about and take care as you're messing around. That's the first thing we all look at is like what's in the background, what's available.
The
old
Lee, then Jeff.
Okay.
So what I was actually going to say two things. One is when it comes to backgrounds without the virtual, don't forget these are great reflecting surfaces.
Yep.
For reflecting your monitors, and we've had some conversations about that on the show. But the other thing is that, and I'm sure Jeff remembers this too from his employment, I don't think there's enough conversation about OPSEC, operational security, in the workplace. And it's not just for the government sector. It's really, particularly with all of this stuff, there's so much gets revealed on IT. Even when we were working in the offices, I mean, you got the whiteboard in the background that has all the details about the latest project, which probably isn't open source information. So I just keep saying, we got to teach people about OPSEC and use the term.
I got busted on the eyeglasses. Somebody said I can. I was in a meeting and a guy said I can see that you're not paying attention because he could see what I was doing on the other screen.
So I want to
hold on, Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff. I was next.
Okay. Go.
I was going to say, this reminds me of, remember in the old days where you used to fly on airplanes? All the times I sit and watch what people are working on next to me, across the road from me on their laptops, with or without a privacy screen. They don't work. And I have always made it it was a personal decision I made. I can't say I don't ever, but I very rarely do work on an airplane or in a public place, just because I know if I was looking at me, I'd be reading the screen, and I don't want to bring customer data up in front of the screen. What it also, just a quick story, back when I was working the PCI assessment for Heartland Data Systems, they were the payment processor that was breached back in 2008, 2009. One of the things that I discovered when I was just sort of doing I didn't call it OSINT back in the day. We used to call it Recon. But the guy that was there, I want to say he was their CIO, was running for local office, like a state representative, county board of whatever. So he had a website set up, and on his website he talked about all the cool stuff he did at Heartland Payment Systems as a CIO, and all the cool technology that they were employing at Heartland, including network devices, network gear, firewalls. He was giving version numbers of stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, it's like a roadmap. So, if I was the bad guy, this would be very useful information. And I sent an email out about it to my team because, I was working with people that aren't from the dark side. And I said, there's this thing called, operational security. And, look at all this stuff that you can get. You got to be careful what you put out there. One more story, and then I'll shut up. In the early days, back when I was talking to the Department of Justice about doing their security assessment before the incident, if you don't talking about.
We know the incident.
Watch the interview. Mm-hmm. We went down for an initial meeting with the managers of the IT group and assistant secretary, deputy, whatever, big titles, big, huge conference rooms, wooden desks and everything. And I had looked up, and back then I'm not talking Google people, I'm talking like Gopher databases, Archie databases, bulletin boards and things like that. But I went out on the internet to see what I could find out about this, muckety muck suit that we were going to be meeting with. And I discovered that he was the member of a car club. I won't even say what kind of, I'm not naming his name. I'm not going to say what kind of car, but he was the member of a car club. So we were down there having the meeting, and they're like, well, going through all the details. Should we really talk to you? You're NSA, and I know you can help, but do we really want to do this? And so on and so forth. And we sort of came to terms and decided on the game plan. After the meeting was over, I walked up to him and I said, you still got that, red such and such 19 whatever year car? And he was like, how did you know? And I'm like, I'm a hacker, dude. Anyway, that's it.
That's a good definition of hacker.
Yep.
I was writing a forensics case on an airplane one time, and this guy next to me apparently was watching me write this forensics case.
Well, that was me. That was me.
Well, when I got off the plane, there was a law enforcement officer standing there, and he was like, can we speak to you for a minute? And I was like, sure, what's up? And he was like, we'd like to take a look at your laptop. And I was like, okay, why? And he was like, someone on the plane told the flight crew that maybe you were doing some bad things, and that, and then I was like, oh, it's a forensics case. And I was like, yeah, no, see, these aren't child porn pictures. They're like pictures of cats. They're not real. And the word child porn was on the screen a lot, but. And then I showed him on my ID, and he was like, "Oh yeah," and but it was. You
realized you were working for law enforcement.
It made me want to do really funny ones to open up on airplanes,
right?
That would probably get me put in jail, but I haven't done those.
so I'd like to make one comment really quick. And the other thing about OPSEC that people are not paying enough attention to today is the COVID times. We've all switched to a lot of video conferencing, and I have numerous times watched people share screens and not focus it on a particular window, or just and email listings come up, and all sorts of terrible OPSEC moves.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm very conscious about that.
Have you noticed it's not always what's on your screen at the time you're sharing it, but what can pop up while you're sharing your screen? Because every application wants to give you some type of information when it comes in, right? And that could be Slack, that could be Discord, that could be email, that could be any number of things.
Don't share full screen, share an application.
Right? That's my issue with sharing your screen.
Yeah, so
to the
my
point
guidance,
where I just turn off all notifications on all applications on all my systems, because I'm like, I could be sharing my screen, or during a broadcast, I just shared my screen during this broadcast, right?
I try to shut everything off I can, and notifications, pop-ups. What do you call it? One more story. What do you call it when you're on a Zoom meeting and you're doing an interview with the network engineer, the firewall engineer, and you're asking him to log into the firewall, and so you watch him crack open Notepad,
copy and paste the password,
scroll down a list of passwords.
Oh yeah.
You call it a travesty.
Have you ever seen the one? Have you ever seen the one in class where the professor is got a big screen in class, and they start to log into the system, and they get the wrong box, and they're typing their password on the username line? I've seen that so many times, and you're just like, I literally went up after the class I was sitting in on, and I was like, you might want to make a note that you typed your password on that main line. You may want to change that, because that's probably your password for everything, right? And he was like, you could see that? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate, though, if you're on Zoom calls, just good general guidance, everybody. Don't share the whole screen. Share a specific application.
Yeah, absolutely.
And turn off all unnecessary applications if you need to. Like, shut them down. That should be standard practice. That's good offset.
If you're sharing PowerPoint, put it in damn presentation mode. Because if you don't, you're losing half the screen.
Yeah.
Just a pet peeve.
I want to call it a couple other stories. Qualys was hit with a ransomware attack, and Qualys is a sponsor. Also, sponsor or not, I don't blame SolarWinds necessarily for the hack. Like, we're all susceptible. We all have software. All software has vulnerabilities. All companies have some. The pen testers in the room and that are listening can attest that all organizations in some shape, form, or fashion have some type of security vulnerability. So, sponsor or not, everyone is susceptible.
Don't forget we all got layer 8 vulnerabilities too.
Yeah, and exactly. We talked about social engineering as totally a part of hacking, and that's totally a thing. I do want to highlight and go to. I have not spoken to anyone, at Qualys about this, but I want to pull from their official statements. Ben Carr has issued some statements and said that Acelion was the vendor that. What I garner from this is that it was software to be able to share files, right? And we've all seen software that allows you to share communications and/or files with the organization. Acelion is a platform to do that. Qualys discovered that there was a vulnerability on December 21st and patched it on December 22nd of 2020. And I think that's you can't ask for any better response,
that's nice.
From a company. So Qualys, and there were a couple of other things in the article that I was like, well, Qualys really did like their due diligence. And to translate that to a vendor that is not a sponsor, we also kind of gave props to Rockwell, even though we thought Rockwell had a lot of time that passed. We understood the situation.
Yep.
In the context of that particular, that while it may have took them a while, they were working with their customers to make sure that they had protections in place before they came public with that. So I think that I've been guilty of this in the past, to kind of jump to pointing at the company and a group of people that may be the victim of a breach, but not understanding the whole story, that everyone is susceptible to this.
Hey, a question and a comment, Paul. Were you still at Tenable when Ben Carr worked at Tenable? Or had you already
might have just missed each other. I want to say I've interviewed Ben before.
Because I'm like, Ben Carr, I know him.
Yeah.
We worked together.
He's a good person.
I would suggest reaching out to Mayhul to get the inside scoop on Qualys.
Yeah, Mayhul works there now. I mean, we have lots of we're Qualys. I mean, it's a great company, and again, we're all susceptible. And it wasn't Qualys' software, from what I garnered from reading about it, that led to this. It was a supply chain attack, certainly, is what I've garnered from reading about this. I think that it has been sensationalized. Talk about hyperbole, right?
Well,
security vendor Qualys was.
They're going to go after security vendors when they get this. But I said this yesterday. I was in a meeting with a bunch of people that I was consulting to, and somebody said, "Well, we're in pretty good shape." And I said, "Yeah, but just understand, you got to be ready, because you are going to get got. I mean, at some point you're going to get got. Everybody does. I don't care how well off you think you are. Somebody's going to get you, and so you need to plan for when it happens."
Absolutely, it's your response that matters. It's your response that matters.
We all do it, but we all forget that all these companies that get popped, they're victims of a crime. Regardless, but we tend to focus on the egregious way that they're insecure. It's like, but they're also a victim of a crime. So temper
Paul,
that.
I got a story I'd love to hit.
Let's do it, Larry.
When we start talking OG and all that type of stuff, one that was kind of fun that I saw. My story number 6, and very descriptively titled Matt Blaze on Twitter. Matt was doing some playing with some software-defined radio and stuff in the greater DC area, but he found that there was a 0.2 watt AM radio station belonging to Washington DC's Department of Transportation on 1650 AM, broadcasting traffic information continuously for the last 8 years about road closures for the 2013 presidential inauguration.
Wow.
Yeah.
No way.
Doing some more digging in, they discovered where they got the call sign. They did some digging into the license that had well expired. One of Matt Blaze's followers, Rob Stumpf, wrote an article for The Drive about it. did some investigative reporting, actually reached out to the person who the license was issued to, and it went away. It disappeared.
I like that in this Twitter thread, Kim Zetter has a great comment. She says, "Seems like a glitch in the Matrix." I couldn't have made any better comment myself. Like that's great.
And Matt Blaze's comment was very Fallout 3-esque. It had that feel to it. But the one that I thought was kind of fun. And you think about what happened, like in the traffic broadcasts, and for a big event like that, they will place mobile transmitters around low power mobile transmitters, so folks know what the traffic looks like. And it is likely that one of the low power transmitters was like on one of those rolling street signs, that people were hacking, powered by solar, and is sitting like unused in some parking lot in the greater DC metro area. And just unused, and no one thought to actually turn it off, and it's being powered by solar this whole time, and it's just sitting there running.
That's awesome.
Now, Java, it's interesting, unrelated to the story. We talked, Kim Zetter, with Countdown to Zero Day, and the respect we have for that work, compared to some of the other, books we've talked about.
Did I miss that? I don't think I was on that. Did we actually talk to Kim Zetter on the show?
No, we need to get her on the show, Joff.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We have to.
Oh
my God. If that is a mission, we need to get Kim Zetter on the show.
Because Countdown to Zero Day was, we fact checked that with our peers 6 Ways to Sunday, right? When we read it, we're like, really, was that? And she just did a great job of researching all the facts and putting that together in a very cohesive story. And I will note, without hyperbole, right?
No, it was down the line. A fantastic. Look, everybody out there, if you have not read Countdown to Zero Day by Kim Zetter,
must read.
Go get it.
Read it.
It is like, if you're in this industry, it will open your eyes as really an amazing read.
Great book.
Yep. What else do we have on the list before we round out the show? I want to see if there was another.
Oh, I had one I grabbed, but I didn't get a chance to dive into it. And that was my number 6. NSA publishes guidance on adoption of Zero Trust. We've done a lot of shows on Zero Trust, and I just thought it was really interesting that they're actually coming up with a guidance. And there's a lot of background information, if I remember right, about how prepared you had to be before you didn't just go out and buy and install Zero Trust. I just thought it's a topic we've talked about a lot, and I thought it was an interesting blend of what we talk about. Had you caught that?
Yeah, because I thought Peter did a great job of describing Zero Trust and dispelling some of the myths. And Lee, I agree. I think it's very telling that NSA is also kind of latching onto that message as a way to actually secure things, right? I think is what we've kind of described as hardening and what we were trying to again, I go back to liken it to Chroot environments, like making sure that processes down to the process level, the processes are only doing what they're supposed to do, and that's really hard. And I think there's some great technologies out there that allow us to accomplish that.
You're not running with scissors. Go ahead.
What's interesting to What's interesting to me is the defensive mission of NSA was dissolved several years ago. So I wonder what part of NSA is actually publishing it. But I might know some people. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I also just want to call out if you predicted that the consolidation in cybersecurity was to be happening, that you'd be right. And there was 2 news articles this week that really, in announcements that really brought this home for me. And one is that there is a private equity group that has merged the companies Thycotic and Centrify in the identity space. And on the authentication space, Okta has now bought Auth0. We've certainly, in these 2 events happening in the same week, is hugely telling that there is a consolidation inside of this industry. I don't want it to stifle innovation. I still want to see startups coming into this space. But I think for a lot of the major categories, we are seeing a lot of consolidation.
That's theoretically the standard. I mean, that happens in
any
every
growing industry, right? That's the standard.
I mean, that's the way. I mean, all the business literature will show you that down through history that you have that kind of pattern. That initially it's all innovation, and then it becomes like stasis kind of stuff. And it will get harder for startups then because you've got big players who've consolidated, and those big players are going to have more money and more resources and more people, and it gets harder. They get more barriers to entry spring up, and that's the tendency of big players is they don't want competition. They want to say we own it.
They're going to swallow the competition and integrate it rather than compete
and they
with
tend
them.
to stifle it too because they see you've seen this in IT, you saw it in mainframe, and you see somebody like IBM saying we don't want these new players out there in their garage, so just go buy them out. Go offer them $1 million and they'll go away. And we'll take their stuff, put it on the shelf, and we don't have to worry about it for another 10 years. So, I mean, it's going to happen, and it is. Like you said, you're starting to see that. So you're seeing the collapse of all these little dots into bigger dots,
rather than 20 or 30 players in a given category, right?
You'll get down to 3 or 4. Eventually there'll be these 3 big names, and they kind of drive everything. And there'll always be these people saying, "Hey, let's take them out. Me and you are going to get together and do this." But it creates barriers to entry. So I think you're seeing that now. It's starting to mature.
Absolutely. Great write-up on the AnyDesk remote code execution vulnerability. My story number 14. Look, if you're interested in reverse engineering and or exploit development, go read my story number 14. Just an awesome write-up of not only looking at an application, but looking at how the application operates, looking at fuzzing aspects of that application, how to do that, and just a whole approach to pointing out the flaws in discovering the flaws in a particular piece of software. I thought it was one of the better write-ups that I've seen. I can probably only point to maybe half a dozen of these that come out in a given year that really not only walk you through all the technical details, but also the process of where the person started and where they kind of went from there to find those esoteric flaws that led them to, hey, I got a remote code execution.
I really like that story. I thought that's really cool. Right? It's a great example. If you're teaching classes or something, it's a case study you could present to your students, and this is how this happened. So I think it's a really nice story.
I haven't dug into the hackers release a new jailbreak for almost every iPhone. That was kind of telling. Also some exploitation involved in that. It
only works on version iOS 11 to 14.3. So Apple did patch this, but this was based on a CVE, and so if you have before 14.4, you can have a jailbreak. But
and just be careful if you're going to jailbreak your iPhone.
I said that when I reported this story.
You can break that shit pretty easily.
I said, if you're going to do this, be sure and do it on somebody else's phone first. So.
Do it on your burner phone.
And I thought my story number 6 was interesting. Several Cisco products exposed to a DOS attack due to a snort vulnerability. The interesting thing here for me was this vulnerability, they state, this vulnerability was found during the resolution of a support case, and there's no evidence it has been exploited in the wild. Basically, processing of certain packets cause a DOS vulnerability in Snort, which translates to multiple Cisco products that have integrated it.
Yep, it's a malformed packet problem.
When you talk to Marty Resch, as we've done on numerous occasions here on the show over time, he will express the difficulties in parsing because you're taking air quotes user input, right? Data from the network.
That's right.
Is right, very dynamic, right? And you're processing that. Inherently, vulnerabilities are gonna and software issues are gonna arise. And here's
so not only Snort, right? Wireshark has had several issues with this same issue of oh my God, we're having to create a buffer, we're having to process data.
Right.
Just that very nature of that software operation is subject to vulnerability. And if you don't do it right, you're going to get in trouble. So Wiresharks have several plugins that have been vulnerable. It's not surprising at all that Snort would suffer from this same issue. And for that matter, while we're on that topic, it's not an IDS, but Zeek might well have the same kind of problem too, because it's doing protocol analysis. So,
also, my story number 3: why we need more blue team voices at the table. They state, I'm going to tell you one of the dirty secrets of enterprise cybersecurity. There's a lot of practitioners that secretly wish their company would get hacked, because at least then someone would listen to them. These people tend to reside on what frequently we refer to as the blue team. I'm not sure I agree with all of the statements in this article, but it certainly underscores the problem that we still have today, that if you're on the blue team and you're bringing up an issue that we could be vulnerable to attack, it's harder than you're with the red team and you're like, I just did this attack. And I think that's really the heart and soul of this article, right? Is expressing those challenges that we have. Then on the red team, we could say, yeah, like we did this thing, and like here's your list of all your users and passwords, versus the blue team going, we should really like do this stuff for security. Jeff,
I agree with your sentiment, but I don't think it's just the blue team. It's any security person in the company. If they're doing defense, I guess by definition they're the blue team. But they may be one guy or gal, and they may be screaming from the rooftops, and until something bad happens, because they're not, company's not required to do something because of compliance or regulation. They're just not going to do anything. We've talked about that before.
It's still an issue.
You have to demonstrate this stuff. If you go to the C-level and you say this is, they say, has it happened? I mean, it's really tough to get traction. That's why.
It's yet another one of my pet peeves, and I've just been in a mood for the last week or two. I apologize, but
bring out the curmudgeon, Jeff. Bring it out.
If you're a security professional, if you're a security expert, whatever, you've got all these certs and experience, whatever. People should listen to you, and if they're not listening to you, you should always be introspective and try to figure out whether somehow you're not presenting the message correctly, or try something different and keep trying something different. But at some point, it's got to be on them too. And I very often talk about changing the message and figuring, that's the whole art of the Jedi mind trick. You gotta be heard. But there's also an element of nobody's going to listen to you. And why won't people? They go out and hire security professionals for their organization, but then they don't listen to them. Bugs me.
Not always.
Well, I'm overgeneralizing, but it happens more times than not, I think, Jeff.
Not always, but I do think, you guys are circling around the very definition of the penetration testing industry, right? Our job is to actually demonstrate and show those risks in real visceral terms that make people pay attention. And if we're not able to do that, then we're not doing our job correctly, because frankly, what we're actually in the process of doing every time we engage in a pen test is not only detecting the vulnerabilities, but exploiting them and demonstrating how they can cause risk and damage to the organization without actually damaging the organization, right? That is the essence of the industry. And if we're not able to communicate that stuff adequately, then, we must be doing that, because the industry still exists for, now a pretty good period of time. So there's enough people listening that it is a funded industry.
Well, it's interesting. So Jerry Gamblin is the author of this article, and it says Jerry Gamblin's interest in security ignited in 1989 when he hacked Oregon Trail on his third grade class Apple IIe, which is the platform that I started on. And the Oregon Trail was detailed in the Stephen Levy book, Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution, and detailed I don't remember the name of the software company that made Oregon Trail. But there's a whole background there, drunken parties at the software company. There's a whole story about Oregon Trail on Apple IIe. It sparks like respect that he can trace his roots back to there. But what Jerry's arguing for, that Jason Albuquerque talks about on Business Security Weekly, is aligning security to the business, and that works in a lot of scenarios, but not all, right? So like if you have an e-commerce website advocating for bot detection, yes, improves security, but also protects the business. We talked about in our tech segment today about RTX 30 series and AMD processors. We can extend that to Xbox Series S and X, as well as PlayStation 5, and the supply chain issue and the challenges that retailers face to combat bots, that they want their products to be sold to consumers, not to people who are going to resell them or use those to mine cryptocurrency, right? That's a business thing. It's like, if you can align security to the business objectives, you've got a much better case. And I find that, and Jason will tell, that aligns in many different aspects, but not always. There's, I think, where the friction comes in is when you're trying to align it to things that are like, we should do this so we don't get hacked and it doesn't destroy the business. That's harder to understand than there's a business benefit as well as some business insurance to it, right?
I disagree with what Jason says, because take the Florida water treatment plant from a couple weeks ago. That model's not going to work for them, because if they have to do anything to change, they've got to go to the local government to get funding.
I see a great segment, Jeff. You just sparked a great point. We should bring Jason on to talk about how you align security to the business and discuss it with this panel. Because you're right, it doesn't align always. Where does it align? Where does it fall down? And how do we deal with it?
Well, and getting back to the article, your initial statement about, the blue team person is the one screaming, "I wish we would do a pen test." He knows what's wrong with the network, what they need, and is frustrated. So, like, okay, they said, we should get popped, or we should be hired to have somebody pop us professionally, pen testing team. Yeah. But companies that aren't listening to their people, they're not going to go out and pay for a Joff to come in and do the pen test. They're going to come in, with the pen test puppy mill, glorified scan at best, and only if they have to.
Yes. There is a.
It sounds good in theory. But it doesn't play out in the real world more often than not.
Well, I agree, Jeff. There's a class, a category, a subset of companies that will only do security if they have to.
Right.
It doesn't matter if the pen tester is telling them. Doesn't matter if the blue team, air quotes blue team, right? Like the people who are working for the company, responsible for IT. You can term those a blue team, which I think is kind of a disservice, right? They're working for the greater good of the company. They want to prevent the breaches from happening. But the business isn't going to implement those security controls unless something bad happens. And this something bad happens may not even translate to a red team from our esteemed panel here of pen testers, or from maybe even from external attackers. Who knows?
So there's another piece, though. The other piece is that whoever's asking for the security improvements has to make sure they are aligned with what the business will tolerate. I mean, if you come in saying you gotta update all your struts now in production and there's no time to plan it out, versus some other mitigation. I mean, you got to choose how you make the pitch carefully.
Yeah, we need to move all our exchange to Office 365. That's a bold statement, Lee. Right? You got to back that up.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got to know what that means. That's a big check to write.
Yep.
But I'll tell you, one of my best Jedi mind tricks in my former career as a QSA was going into companies and sitting down with the blue teams, the security people, the IT people, and saying, "Look, you know what's wrong with your network. You know what you need. What are the things that you've been screaming at your management to invest in, and you're not getting it? Because guess what? If I can link it to PCI and make it a gap, guess what you're going to get? Try me." Worked like a charm. And not only did it, I was doing it to build trust and to like get beyond the, you're the stupid auditor, I don't want to talk to you. It's like, no, we got to go through this. It doesn't go away. But people would come back. It's like, it's magical. All of a sudden we've got the whatever it was that we need. So it's something it's not new. It's something that's been ongoing for a while. And of course, the only reason it worked for me is because there was a compliance requirement. And management, the business model was, we want to stay in business and we have to do this PCI thing or else we can't do business. So we're going to do it. and that was the extent of the understanding and caring of executive management. Again, I'm grossly overgeneralizing, but it happened more often than not.
Yeah,
that was the case.
I think we should bring Jason on and have that discussion.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah,
Great.
Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
And out.